The private hangar at JFK International Airport gleamed under the morning sun, its polished concrete floors reflecting the light that streamed through the massive windows. Alicia Winters checked her watch, a subtle Patek Philippe that cost more than some people's homes, and tapped her Louboutin-clad foot impatiently. Her flight was scheduled to depart 20 minutes ago, but her pilot was nowhere to be found. As the CEO of Winters Innovations, one of the fastest-growing tech companies in the world, time wasn't just money, it was opportunity, expansion, evolution, and today she was losing it by the minute. "Ms. Winters, I've tried reaching Captain Reynolds again," her assistant Marcus said, his voice tinged with frustration. Still no answer. Alicia exhaled slowly, controlling her irritation. At 43, she had mastered the art of composure, a skill that had served her well in boardrooms filled with men who underestimated her at every turn. Today was too important to let a delayed flight derail her plans. In less than 6 hours, she was supposed to be signing the biggest acquisition in her company's history, a $4.2 billion deal that would revolutionize the AI landscape and cement Winters Innovations as a global powerhouse. "Find me another pilot," she said, her voice calm but authoritative. "I need to be in San Francisco by noon." Marcus nodded, already scrolling through his contacts. "I'm on it." Alicia turned back to her laptop, reviewing the final contract points for the acquisition. The sleek device balanced perfectly on her knees, her fingers flying across the keyboard as she annotated specific clauses. Her dark hair was pulled back in a tight bun, accentuating her high cheekbones and revealing diamond earrings that caught the light with every slight movement of her head. Her tailored charcoal suit, custom Armani, wrapped around her slender frame with precision, a silent statement of power and elegance. 20 minutes later, Marcus approached again, this time with slightly better news. "I found a pilot who can take you. He was scheduled for another flight this afternoon, but I managed to rearrange things. He'll be here in 15 minutes. "Good," Alicia said, closing her laptop. "Have the jet prepared for immediate takeoff when he arrives." The next 15 minutes passed in a blur of emails and calls. Alicia had built her empire from the ground up, starting with a small software company in her garage 15 years ago. Now, Winters Innovations employed over 12,000 people across the globe, with offices in 23 countries. The acquisition today would add another 3,000 employees to her workforce and expand her company's reach into cutting-edge artificial intelligence research. It was the culmination of 3 years of strategic planning, and nothing, not even a delayed flight, would stop her from seeing it through. The sound of footsteps echoing across the hangar floor drew her attention. A man in a pilot's uniform strode toward them, his cap tucked under his arm. He was tall, with graying temples and the weathered face of someone who had spent years at high altitudes. His name tag read Captain James Davidson. "Ms. Winters?" he asked, extending his hand. "I understand you need to get to San Francisco." Alicia stood, accepting his handshake with a firm grip. "That's correct, Captain. We need to depart immediately." Davidson's eyes flickered over her, a quick assessment that felt more judgmental than professional. His handshake loosened slightly before he pulled away. "I was told this was an emergency situation." "It is," Alicia replied, already gathering her things. "I have a meeting that cannot be delayed." "Right," Davidson said, his tone shifting subtly. "Well, I'll need to do a quick pre-flight check. The jet should be ready in about 30 minutes. Alicia frowned. "My team has already prepared the aircraft. Everything is ready for immediate departure." Davidson's jaw tightened. "With all due respect, ma'am, I'm the pilot. I'll determine when the aircraft is ready for departure." The ma'am landed with a weight that Alicia recognized all too well, condescending, dismissive. It was a tone she'd heard countless times throughout her career, a subtle reminder that no matter how high she climbed, Some people would always see her as something less. But today, she didn't have time to educate another man on his unconscious biases. "Of course, Captain," she said smoothly. "Just please understand that time is of the essence today." Davidson nodded curtly and turned toward the jet. Alicia watched him go, her instincts prickling with unease. Marcus leaned in beside her. "Sorry about this," he whispered. He was the only pilot available on such short notice. "It's fine," Alicia said, though they both knew it wasn't. "Let's just get to San Francisco." 35 minutes later, not the promised 30, Alicia and Marcus boarded the sleek Gulfstream G650. The interior was a testament to understated luxury: cream leather seats, polished walnut trim, and discreet gold accents throughout the cabin. Alicia took her usual seat by the window, setting up her workspace with practiced efficiency. "We're all set for takeoff," the flight attendant, Sophia, announced with a professional smile. "Captain Davidson says we should arrive in San Francisco in approximately 5 hours and 20 minutes. Alicia glanced at her watch again. Even with the delay, they would make it just in time for the signing. She nodded her thanks to Sophia and returned to her work. The takeoff was smooth, the powerful engines of the Gulfstream lifting them into the crisp morning air with barely a tremor. Once they reached cruising altitude, Alicia unbuckled her seatbelt and spread out her documents on the table in front of her. Marcus sat across from her, his own laptop open as they began to review their strategy for the acquisition meeting. "The legal team sent over the final revisions an hour ago," Marcus said, forwarding the documents to her. "Nothing major, just some clarification on the IP transfer timeline." Alicia nodded, scanning the new language. "What about the retention packages for their senior researchers? Have they agreed to the terms?" Before Marcus could answer, the cabin intercom crackled to life. "This is Captain Davidson," came the voice, slightly distorted by the speaker system. "We've reached our cruising altitude of 40,000 feet. Weather looks clear all the way to San Francisco. Flight time remains approximately 5 hours. The message was standard, but something in Davidson's tone made Alicia look up from her documents. There was an edge to his voice, a tightness that hadn't been there during their brief interaction in the hangar. "Is everything all right with the pilot?" she asked Sophia when the flight attendant came to offer them refreshments. Sophia's smile faltered slightly. "Captain Davidson is very experienced," she said carefully. "He's just a bit old school in his methods." Old school, another code word Alicia was all too familiar with. It could mean traditional, or it could mean resistant to change, particularly the kind of change that put women like her in positions of power. She filed the information away and returned to her work, determined not to let anything distract her from the task at hand. An hour into the flight, Alicia needed to use the restroom. As she made her way toward the front of the cabin, she passed the partially open door to the cockpit. Davidson's voice drifted out, low but clear enough for her to hear. "Flying these rich types around like they're royalty," he was saying to his co-pilot. "Acting like her precious meeting can't wait. You know how these people are. Think the world revolves around them." Alicia paused, her hand on the restroom door. "These people." The words hung in the air, loaded with implication. "She's actually one of the biggest tech CEOs in the country," the co-pilot replied, his voice younger, more measured. "Winter's Innovations is huge," Davidson scoffed. "Please. I've been flying long enough to know the real deal from the pretenders. Trust me, there's no way she built that company herself. Probably inherited it from daddy or married into it. That's usually how it works with them." The co-pilot's response was too quiet for Alicia to hear, but Davidson continued, his voice dropping even lower. "I'm just saying, 20 years ago, someone like her wouldn't be chartering private jets and calling the shots. Now they're all over, demanding special treatment. The world's gone crazy with all this diversity nonsense." Alicia stood frozen, her heart pounding in her ears. The words scalded like acid, burning through the protective layers she'd built around herself over years of facing prejudice and dismissal. For a moment, she was transported back to her early days. The venture capitalists who wouldn't meet her eyes during her pitches, the tech conference organizers who assumed she was someone's assistant, the competitors who spread rumors about how she must have slept her way to success. But she wasn't that struggling entrepreneur anymore. She was Alicia Winters, with a net worth of $8.7 billion, featured on the cover of Forbes twice, and named one of Time's most influential people 3 years running. She had earned every inch of her success through brilliant innovation and relentless determination. Taking a deep breath, Alicia composed herself and entered the restroom. When she emerged a few minutes later, her face was a mask of professional calm, but inside, a decision had been made. She wouldn't confront Davidson now, not at 40,000 feet when he was literally in control of her life. But this wouldn't go unanswered. Back in her seat, she found it hard to focus on the acquisition documents. Marcus noticed her distraction immediately. "Everything okay?" he asked, lowering his voice. Alicia considered deflecting, but Marcus had been with her for 7 years. He was more than an assistant. He was her right hand, confidant, and one of the few people she trusted implicitly. "Our captain has some interesting views about people like me," she said quietly. "Apparently I couldn't possibly have built my company myself, must have been daddy or a husband." Marcus's expression darkened. "You heard him say that?" Alicia nodded, her jaw tight. "That and more, but we'll deal with it later. Right now I need to focus on this acquisition." "Alicia," Marcus began, but she held up a hand. "Later," she said firmly. "This deal is too important." For the next 2 hours, Alicia forced herself to concentrate on work, reviewing financials and strategy documents with her usual thoroughness. But beneath her composed exterior, her mind was working on another problem entirely: how to address what she'd heard. The plane hit a patch of turbulence, causing the cabin to shake slightly. The seatbelt sign dinged on, and Sophia came through to check that everyone was secure. "Just a bit of rough air," she assured them with a practiced smile. "Captain Davidson says it should smooth out soon." As if on cue, Davidson's voice came over the intercom again. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing some turbulence. Please remain seated with your seatbelts fastened until we've cleared this patch of weather." The turbulence intensified, the plane dipping suddenly before stabilizing. Alicia gripped the armrests, her papers sliding across the table. Through the window, dark clouds had replaced the clear blue sky, and rain began to streak across the glass. "I thought the weather was supposed to be clear," she said to Marcus, who was hurriedly securing their documents. The plane lurched again, more violently this time. A moment later, the cockpit door opened and Captain Davidson emerged, his face tight with concern. "Ms. Winters," he said, his voice clipped, "we have a situation." Alicia straightened in her seat, her expression betraying nothing of the tension she felt toward this man. "What kind of situation, Captain?" Davidson's eyes flickered over her before settling somewhere above her head, as if he couldn't bring himself to look directly at her. "We need to make an emergency landing. There's an issue with one of our fuel pumps." "How serious is it?" Alicia asked, her voice calm but firm. "Serious enough that we can't make it to San Francisco," Davidson replied. "I've already contacted air traffic control. We're being redirected to a small airport in Nevada. It's about 40 minutes away." The news hit Alicia like a physical blow. A delay of this magnitude wouldn't just push back her meeting, it could jeopardize the entire acquisition. Competitors were circling, ready to swoop in if she showed any sign of hesitation. The deal had taken months to negotiate, and the window of opportunity was narrowing by the hour. "Is there any way we can make it to a larger airport?" One where we might be able to get another jet, she asked, already calculating alternatives in her head. Davidson's jaw tightened. No, Ms. Winters. This isn't a matter of convenience. It's a matter of safety. The nearest suitable airport is in Carson City, and that's where we're going. Something in his tone, a hint of satisfaction perhaps, made Alicia suspect that the situation might not be as dire as he claimed, but questioning a pilot's assessment of aircraft safety wasn't just inappropriate, it could be dangerous. She had no choice but to trust his judgment, regardless of what she'd overheard earlier. I understand, she said, nodding crisply. Thank you for informing me. Davidson seemed surprised by her composed response, as if he'd expected her to throw a tantrum. Without another word, he returned to the cockpit, closing the door firmly behind him. As soon as he was gone, Marcus leaned forward. What do you think? Is this legitimate? Alicia considered the question carefully, aware that her personal feelings about Davidson might be clouding her judgment. I don't know, she admitted, but we need to prepare for the worst-case scenario. Start looking for alternative transportation from Carson City to San Francisco and call Robert at the Miller Group. Tell him we might be delayed, but the deal is still on. Marcus nodded, already reaching for his phone. What about the pilot? Are you going to report what you heard? Alicia glanced toward the cockpit door. One problem at a time, she said. Right now, I need to get to that meeting. The plane began its descent, banking sharply as it changed course. Through the window, Alicia could see the landscape changing, lush greenery giving way to the stark, beautiful desolation of the Nevada desert. Under different circumstances, she might have appreciated the view. Now all she could think about was the ticking clock and what awaited them on the ground. Sophia appeared, her professional demeanor firmly in place despite the tension in the cabin. Captain Davidson asked me to inform you that we'll be landing in approximately 30 minutes. The airport is small but has facilities where you can make arrangements while the plane is being inspected. Do they have aircraft maintenance staff who can address the issue quickly? Alicia asked. A flicker of uncertainty crossed Sophia's face. It's a regional airport, so their resources are limited. But Captain Davidson has assured me that he's made arrangements for a maintenance crew to meet us. Alicia nodded, thanking her. As Sophia moved away, Alicia turned to look out the window again, her mind racing. Even if they landed safely, the logistics of getting from Carson City to San Francisco in time for her meeting seemed increasingly impossible. Charter flights would take time to arrange, and commercial options from such a small airport would be limited at best. For the first time, she allowed herself to consider the possibility that she might miss the acquisition signing. The thought sent a chill through her that had nothing to do with the cabin's temperature. The Miller Group wouldn't wait forever, and she knew at least 3 competitors who would happily step in if she faltered. Marcus, she said, turning back to her assistant, we need a backup plan. If I can't be there in person, I need to at least be present virtually. Make sure the legal team is prepared to handle things on the ground in San Francisco. Marcus nodded, typing furiously on his tablet. Already on it. And I've found a private helicopter service that might be able to get us from Carson City to San Francisco. It's expensive, but they could have someone at the airport within an hour of our landing. Book it, Alicia said without hesitation. Whatever it costs. The descent continued, the plane dropping altitude more rapidly now. The seatbelt sign dinged again, and Sophia made a final pass through the cabin, checking that everything was secured. The tension was palpable, not just from the emergency landing, but from the uncertainty of what would happen once they were on the ground. 20 minutes later, the plane touched down with a jolt that sent Alicia's stomach lurching. The runway was much shorter than what she was accustomed to at major airports, and Davidson had to brake hard, the engines roaring in protest as they reversed thrust. Finally, they came to a complete stop, the sudden silence almost deafening after the noise of the landing. Through the window, Alicia could see that they had landed at what appeared to be little more than a glorified airstrip. A small terminal building stood about 100 yards away, its faded signage barely visible. A handful of small aircraft were parked nearby, but there was no sign of the bustling activity she was accustomed to at larger airports. The cockpit door opened and Davidson emerged, removing his cap as he approached the cabin. "We've landed safely," he announced, his voice carrying an undercurrent of self-satisfaction. "The fuel pump issue needs to be inspected before we can continue. I've been told it could take several hours." "Several hours," Alicia repeated, struggling to keep her voice level. "Captain, as I mentioned before, I have an extremely important meeting in San Francisco this afternoon." Davidson shrugged, a gesture so casual it bordered on insolent. "Safety regulations, Ms. Winters. I can't bypass them, not even for—" He paused, his eyes flicking over her once more. "Important business meetings." The implication hung in the air, heavy and unmistakable. In that moment, Alicia was certain Davidson had deliberately diverted them. Whether the fuel pump issue was real or fabricated, he had chosen this remote airport knowing exactly what it would mean for her schedule. "I understand safety is paramount," she said, her voice cool, "but I would appreciate if you could expedite the inspection process as much as possible." Davidson's lips twitched in what might have been a suppressed smile. "Of course, I'll do everything I can." With that, he turned and headed toward the exit, his posture relaxed, unhurried. As soon as the door opened, the desert heat rushed in, a stark contrast to the climate-controlled cabin. Alicia gathered her belongings, her mind already formulating a plan. She would not be defeated by one man's prejudice, not when she had overcome far greater obstacles in her life. "The helicopter service confirmed they can be here in 50 minutes, Marcus whispered as they prepared to disembark. "But there's another problem. Robert just called from the Miller Group. They've moved up the signing. It's now scheduled for 2 p.m. instead of 4 p.m. Alicia froze, checking her watch. It was just past 11 a.m. Even with the helicopter, making it to San Francisco by 2 p.m. would be cutting it dangerously close. "Did they say why?" she asked, although she already suspected the answer. Marcus's expression confirmed her fears. "Apparently, Chen Technologies made a counteroffer this morning. The board is getting nervous." Chen Technologies was her most aggressive competitor, led by a CEO known for his ruthless tactics. If they were making a play for the Miller Group now, it wasn't a coincidence. Somehow they had learned about the delay in her arrival. Stepping out onto the tarmac, Alicia squinted against the harsh Nevada sun. The airport was even smaller than it had appeared from the air. A single runway surrounded by miles of empty desert, with mountains visible in the distance. A maintenance worker was already approaching the plane, toolbox in hand, but he moved with the unhurried pace of someone who knew there was no rush. Davidson stood nearby, speaking with what appeared to be the airport manager. Seeing Alicia emerge from the plane, he gestured toward the terminal building. "You can wait in there," he called out. "There's air conditioning at least." The terminal, as it turned out, consisted of a single room with a few plastic chairs, a vending machine, and a bored-looking attendant behind a small counter. The air conditioning was minimal at best, the space barely cooler than the scorching heat outside. "This is deliberate," Alicia said quietly to Marcus once they were inside. "He's sabotaging me." Marcus looked around the dismal waiting area, his expression grim. "What do you want to do?" Alicia took a deep breath, centering herself. Throughout her career, she had faced countless attempts to undermine her, subtle discrimination, overt hostility, and everything in between. Each time she had emerged stronger, more determined. This would be no different. "First, make sure that helicopter is on its way," she said, her voice steady. "Then, I want you to find out everything you can about Captain James Davidson. His employment history, any complaints filed against him, everything. You're going to report him? Marcus asked. Alicia's gaze hardened. I'm going to do what I've always done, make sure there are consequences for this kind of behavior. But right now, my priority is getting to San Francisco. She pulled out her phone, relieved to see there was at least cellular service in this remote location. Dialing the number for her legal team in San Francisco, she prepared to brief them on the situation. As the call connected, she glanced outside through the terminal's dusty windows. Davidson was standing by the plane, watching the maintenance worker with apparent interest. His posture was relaxed, his expression almost smug. Looking at him, Alicia felt a surge of anger, but beneath it was something else, determination. Davidson thought he knew who she was, had made assumptions based on her gender and the color of her skin. He had no idea what she was capable of. The call to her legal team went through, and Alicia turned away from the window. "Jack, it's Alicia," she said, her voice clear and commanding. "We have a situation. I need you to stall the Miller Group for as long as you can. Tell them I'm still coming, but there's been a slight delay." As she spoke, she noticed movement outside. Davidson was walking toward the terminal, his eyes fixed on her through the window. Something in his expression made her instincts prickle with warning. "I have to go," she told Jack, ending the call as Davidson pushed open the terminal door. "Ms. Winters," he said, his tone falsely pleasant. "I'm afraid I have some bad news about your plane." Alicia met Davidson's gaze with unwavering composure. "What news would that be, Captain?" Davidson seemed momentarily thrown by her calm demeanor. He had clearly expected, perhaps even hoped for, a display of frustration or panic. When none came, his eyes narrowed slightly before he continued. "The fuel pump issue is more complicated than initially thought," he said, a hint of satisfaction creeping into his voice. "The maintenance crew needs to order a replacement part. It won't arrive until tomorrow morning at the earliest." The words landed like a physical blow, but Alicia's expression remained neutral. "I see," she said, her voice steady. "And what alternatives do we have?" Davidson spread his hands in a gesture of mock helplessness. "Not many, I'm afraid. This isn't exactly a major hub. There are no commercial flights out of here, and charter options are extremely limited." "Fortunately," Alicia replied smoothly, "I've already arranged for a helicopter to transport me to San Francisco." For a moment, Davidson's mask slipped, revealing genuine surprise, and something else. Annoyance, anger. It disappeared quickly, replaced by a thin smile. "A helicopter?" he said, his tone patronizing. "Ms. Winters, we're in the middle of the Nevada desert. The nearest city is over 100 miles away. I doubt any helicopter service would—" "They'll be here in 30 minutes, Marcus interrupted, looking up from his phone. "They've just confirmed." Davidson's jaw tightened. He hadn't expected this level of resourcefulness, hadn't anticipated that his sabotage would be so quickly countered. Alicia could almost see the wheels turning in his mind as he searched for another obstacle to throw in her path. "Well," he said finally, "that's certainly industrious of you. Though I should warn you, there's a weather system moving in from the west. Helicopter travel might be inadvisable." Alicia arched an eyebrow. "Strange. The forecast showed clear skies all the way to San Francisco when we took off this morning." "Weather changes quickly in this region," Davidson replied, the lie smooth on his tongue. "But of course it's your decision. Your safety is my only concern." The irony of this statement was so blatant that Alicia almost laughed. Instead, she regarded him with cool assessment. "Thank you for your concern, Captain. I'll take it under advisement." Davidson lingered, seemingly unwilling to concede the interaction. "I understand you have an important meeting," he said finally. "It must be challenging to manage such responsibilities." The implication hung in the air, a barely veiled suggestion that such responsibilities shouldn't be hers to manage in the first place. Alicia had heard variations of this sentiment throughout her career, the subtle questioning of her capabilities, the implicit suggestion that her position was somehow unearned or undeserved. "Not particularly," she replied, her tone light but pointed. "I find that competence usually prevails, despite occasional attempts to undermine it." Davidson's expression hardened, the pretense of politeness wearing thin. He opened his mouth to respond, but was interrupted by the terminal door swinging open. The co-pilot, a younger man with a more professional demeanor, stepped inside. "Captain," he said, his voice tense, "could I speak with you for a moment? There's been a development with the maintenance situation." Davidson hesitated, clearly reluctant to leave the confrontation unfinished. But the co-pilot's expression brooked no argument, and after a moment's pause, Davidson nodded curtly and followed him outside. As soon as they were gone, Marcus moved closer to Alicia. "The helicopter will be here in 25 minutes, he confirmed. "And I've started gathering information on Davidson. He's been with the charter company for 15 years, but there have been incidents." "What kind of incidents?" Alicia asked, her attention divided between Marcus and the window, where she could see Davidson and the co-pilot engaged in what appeared to be a heated discussion. "Complaints, mostly," Marcus replied, scrolling through his phone. "Nothing that led to formal disciplinary action, but there's a pattern. Female passengers reporting disrespectful behavior, minority clients claiming discriminatory treatment. The company seems to have buried most of it." Alicia wasn't surprised. The aviation industry, like many others, had a long history of protecting its own, especially when those involved fit the traditional pilot mold: white, male, ex-military. Davidson was likely viewed as an asset, his experience and technical skills outweighing what management probably dismissed as personality conflicts. "Keep digging," she said. "I want to know everything about him by the time we reach San Francisco." Through the window, she could see that the discussion between Davidson and the co-pilot had escalated. The younger man was gesturing emphatically, his face flushed with what appeared to be anger or frustration. Davidson's back was to the terminal, but his rigid posture spoke volumes. "Something's happening out there," Alicia murmured. Before Marcus could respond, his phone buzzed with an incoming call. He glanced at the screen. "It's Robert from the Miller Group again." Alicia nodded, her expression grave. "Take it. Find out if we have any more time." As Marcus stepped away to take the call, Alicia moved closer to the window, watching the scene unfold outside. The co-pilot was now pointing at the plane, his gestures becoming more insistent. Davidson shook his head repeatedly, his hands clenched at his sides. The terminal attendant, who had been silently observing the unfolding drama, cleared his throat. "Excuse me, ma'am," he said hesitantly. "Would you like some water or coffee while you wait? We don't have much here, but—" "Water would be fine, thank you," Alicia replied, offering him a smile that seemed to ease his nervousness. As he fetched a bottle of water from a small refrigerator behind the counter, Alicia took the opportunity to ask, "Do you know what's going on with our plane? The pilot mentioned a fuel pump issue." The attendant glanced out the window, then back at her, lowering his voice. "I overheard the maintenance guy talking to the co-pilot. He said there's nothing wrong with the fuel pump, said the readings are all normal." Alicia's suspicions were confirmed. "I see," she said quietly. "Thank you for letting me know." The attendant nodded, a look of understanding passing between them. He had clearly sensed the tension between her and Davidson and had drawn his own conclusions. Marcus returned, his expression troubled. "The Miller Group is pushing for an answer," he reported. "Chen Technologies has increased their offer. The board is meeting at 1:30 p.m. to make a final decision." Alicia checked her watch. It was nearly noon. Even with the helicopter, they would be cutting it extremely close. And if Davidson found a way to delay their departure further, "We need to get to that helipad now," she decided. "Where is it located?" "About a quarter-mile from the terminal," the attendant supplied helpfully. "I can call someone to drive you there if you'd like." "That would be appreciated," Alicia said, gathering her belongings. She didn't want to spend another minute in this terminal, waiting for Davidson to concoct his next obstacle. As the attendant made the call, Alicia watched through the window as the confrontation outside reached its climax. The co-pilot threw up his hands in apparent exasperation and stalked away, leaving Davidson alone on the tarmac. For a moment, the pilot stood motionless, his fists clenched at his sides. Then, as if sensing her gaze, he turned toward the terminal. Their eyes met through the glass, and Alicia saw something dangerous flash across his face, a mixture of anger, resentment, and wounded pride. It was the look of a man who wasn't accustomed to being thwarted, especially not by someone he deemed inferior. Davidson started toward the terminal, his stride purposeful. Alicia stood her ground, preparing for whatever confrontation was coming. The door swung open with unnecessary force. "Ms. Winters," Davidson said, his voice tight with barely controlled anger. "I've just been informed that you've arranged for alternate transportation." "That's correct," Alicia replied calmly. "Given the uncertain timeline for repairs to your aircraft, I've secured a helicopter to ensure I reach my meeting in San Francisco." Davidson's jaw worked as he struggled to maintain his composure. "As the captain of your chartered flight, I have a responsibility to advise against this course of action. The weather conditions are perfectly clear," interrupted a new voice. The co-pilot had entered behind Davidson, his expression resolute. "I've just checked the latest weather reports. There's no system moving in from the west. Visibility is excellent all the way to San Francisco." Davidson turned to his colleague, his expression murderous. "This isn't your concern, First Officer Reynolds." "Actually, it is," Reynolds replied firmly. "As First Officer, I have a responsibility to ensure the safety and well-being of our passengers. That includes providing them with accurate information." He turned to Alicia. "The helicopter should have no issues with weather today, Miss Winters." The tension in the room was palpable. Davidson's face had flushed dark with anger, a vein pulsing visibly at his temple. First Officer Reynolds stood his ground, though Alicia could see that challenging his superior wasn't coming easily to him. "Thank you, First Officer," she said, deliberately emphasizing his title. "I appreciate your honesty." The terminal door opened again, and an older man in a dusty pickup truck pulled up outside. "Ride to the helipad?" he called through the open door. "Yes, thank you," Alicia replied, moving toward the exit with Marcus close behind. Davidson stepped into her path, blocking her way. "This conversation isn't finished," he said, his voice low and threatening. Alicia met his gaze without flinching. "I believe it is, Captain. Now, if you'll excuse me." For a tense moment, it seemed Davidson might refuse to move. His eyes bore into hers, filled with a resentment so palpable it was almost tangible. Then slowly, he stepped aside. As Alicia passed him, he leaned in slightly and murmured, just loudly enough for her to hear, "People like you always think you're above the rules, that your money makes you special. But up there," he jerked his chin toward the sky, "we all answer to the same laws of physics." The threat was veiled, but unmistakable. Alicia paused, turning to face him fully. "You're right about one thing, Captain Davidson," she said, her voice steady and clear. "We do all answer to the same laws. Physics, yes, but also those that govern professional conduct and basic human decency. I suggest you remember that." Without waiting for his response, she continued toward the exit. Outside, the desert heat hit her like a wall, but it was preferable to the toxic atmosphere inside the terminal. The driver helped load their minimal luggage into the back of his pickup, and soon they were bumping along a dirt road that led away from the airstrip. In the side mirror, Alicia could see Davidson standing outside the terminal watching them depart, his figure growing smaller but no less menacing in the distance. "That was intense," Marcus said once they were out of earshot. "I thought he might actually try to physically stop you." "He considered it," Alicia replied grimly. "Men like Davidson aren't accustomed to being challenged, especially not by women who look like me." The driver, who had been silent until now, glanced at them in the rearview mirror. "That pilot giving you trouble?" he asked, his weathered face creased with concern. Alicia considered how to respond. "Let's just say he has strong opinions about who should be in charge." The driver snorted. "Yeah, I've seen his type before. Former military, right? Some of them never quite adjust to civilian life. Think they're still commanding troops instead of flying planes." As they crested a small rise, a flat stretch of concrete came into view, the helipad, and circling above it, preparing to land, was a sleek black helicopter. "Perfect timing," Marcus said, checking his watch. "If everything goes smoothly from here, we might just make it to San Francisco in time." Alicia nodded, but her mind was elsewhere. Davidson's parting words echoed in her thoughts, carrying an implication that went beyond mere resentment. There had been something in his tone, a dark undercurrent that suggested this confrontation wasn't over. As the pickup pulled up to the helipad, the helicopter was making its final approach, its rotors whipping up clouds of dust from the desert floor. Alicia shielded her eyes, watching as the aircraft settled onto the concrete pad with precision. The pilot cut the engines, and the rotor blades began to slow. A moment later, the side door slid open, and a woman in a flight suit jumped down, approaching them with a professional smile. "Ms. Winters?" she called over the diminishing rotor noise. "I'm Captain Sarah Chen. I understand you're in a hurry to get to San Francisco." Alicia felt an immediate sense of relief wash over her. Captain Chen's confident stance and professional demeanor were a stark contrast to Davidson's hostile presence. "Yes, that's me," Alicia confirmed, extending her hand. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." Chen shook her hand firmly. "Happy to help. My company values punctuality, especially for clients in your position." There was genuine respect in her voice, with none of the resentment or condescension that had colored Davidson's every word. "This is my assistant Marcus," Alicia said, as Marcus stepped forward to shake Chen's hand as well. "Let's get your belongings loaded," Chen said efficiently. "I've plotted the most direct route to San Francisco. Weather conditions are favorable, and I've already filed our flight plan. We should reach your destination in approximately 90 minutes. As they approached the helicopter, Alicia glanced back toward the airport terminal in the distance. A cloud of dust suggested that a vehicle was moving rapidly in their direction. "Is that normal?" she asked, pointing. Chen followed her gaze, frowning slightly. "No, we don't typically get much traffic out here." She shaded her eyes with her hand. "Looks like a Jeep, moving fast." Marcus squinted into the distance. "That's Davidson," he said grimly. "I recognize the airport vehicle." Alicia felt a chill that had nothing to do with the desert breeze. "How quickly can we be in the air, Captain Chen?" Chen assessed the situation in an instant, her expression becoming focused and determined. 5 minutes. Help me load your things, then strap in." They worked swiftly, transferring their minimal luggage to the helicopter's storage compartment. Chen performed her pre-flight checks with practiced efficiency, occasionally glancing at the approaching vehicle, which was now clearly visible as an airport utility jeep with Davidson behind the wheel. "What do you think he wants?" Marcus asked, his voice tense as they climbed into the helicopter's cabin. "Nothing good," Alicia replied, buckling herself into the seat, "but we'll be gone before he gets here." Captain Chen slid into the pilot's seat and began the startup sequence. The rotors slowly began to turn, gathering speed as the engines hummed to life. Through the window, Alicia could see Davidson's Jeep bouncing over the uneven terrain, now less than half a mile away. "He's really pushing that vehicle," Chen remarked, her tone professional but concerned. Whatever he wants, he's determined. The rotors reached full speed, their rhythmic thumping drowning out all other sounds. Chen spoke into her headset, confirming their clearance for takeoff. Alicia and Marcus put on their own headsets, allowing them to communicate over the engine noise. "We're clear to depart," Chen announced, manipulating the controls. The helicopter began to lift, hovering a few feet above the helipad. Davidson's Jeep skidded to a stop nearby, sending a plume of dust into the air. He leaped out, waving his arms frantically, his mouth moving in what was clearly a shout, though they couldn't hear him over the rotor noise. "What's he saying?" Marcus asked, leaning forward to peer through the window. Chen shook her head. "Can't tell, and frankly, we don't have time to find out. Hang on." The helicopter rose higher, beginning to bank away from the helipad. Davidson continued gesturing wildly below them, his face contorted with rage. Then, to Alicia's shock, he ran back to the Jeep and pulled out what looked like a flare gun. "Captain!" Alicia shouted into her headset, pointing. Chen saw it too. "Hold on," she said calmly, and abruptly increased their altitude and speed, putting distance between the helicopter and the ground. A bright red streak shot into the air, but it fell well short of their position, arcing harmlessly back to the ground some distance away. "Did he just—" Marcus began, his voice shaking with disbelief. "Fire a warning flare at us?" "Yes," Chen replied, her voice tight with controlled anger. "That's a serious aviation safety violation. I'm reporting this immediately." She pressed a button on her control panel. "Carson City Tower, this is Falcon Helo 3. I need to report an incident at the Ridgeline helipad." As Chen communicated with air traffic control, Alicia gazed down at the diminishing figure of Davidson, who was now standing motionless by his Jeep, watching their departure. Even from this height, his posture radiated fury and frustration. He had been thwarted, his attempt to sabotage her plans foiled, and clearly he wasn't taking it well. "I've never seen anything like that," Marcus said, his voice still trembling slightly. "He could have caused an accident." "That may have been his intention," Alicia replied quietly, her calm exterior belying the anger she felt building inside. Davidson's actions had gone far beyond discrimination or unprofessionalism. They had veered into something much more dangerous. Chen finished her report to air traffic control and turned slightly in her seat. "Authorities will meet him when he returns to the airport," she said. "Firing a flare in the vicinity of an aircraft is a federal offense. He's looking at serious consequences." "Good," Marcus said firmly. "After what he did, he deserves to lose his license at the very least." Alicia nodded in agreement, but her mind was already shifting focus. With the immediate danger behind them, her thoughts returned to the Miller Group acquisition. "Captain Chen, what's our ETA in San Francisco?" "We should touch down at the heliport near the financial district at approximately 1:40 p.m., Chen replied, checking her instruments. "Will that work for your schedule?" Alicia calculated quickly. The Miller Group's offices were about 10 minutes from the heliport. If the board meeting started at 1:30 as scheduled, she would arrive just as they were beginning deliberations. It would be tight, but not impossible. "That should work," she confirmed. "Thank you again for your assistance on such short notice." Chen smiled briefly. "Just doing my job, Ms. Winters. Though I have to admit this isn't our typical evacuation scenario." As the helicopter stabilized at cruising altitude, Alicia took a moment to breathe. The desert landscape stretched out below them, gradually giving way to more varied terrain as they headed west toward California. Under different circumstances, she might have appreciated the breathtaking view. Now it merely served as a backdrop to her racing thoughts. She pulled out her phone, relieved to see she had signal. "I need to call the legal team again," she told Marcus. Let them know our updated ETA and make sure everything is prepared for my arrival." As she dialed, Marcus leaned closer. "There's something I should mention," he said, his voice low. "While you were loading the helicopter, I received a text from my contact at the charter company. Davidson has a history that goes beyond what I initially found." Alicia paused, her finger hovering over the call button. "What kind of history?" "He was disciplined twice for refusing to fly with female co-pilots," Marcus explained. "And there was an incident 3 years ago with a Middle Eastern client that almost cost him his job. The details were buried, but apparently it was serious enough that he was grounded for 6 months. Alicia absorbed this information in silence. It confirmed what she had already suspected. Davidson's behavior toward her wasn't an isolated incident or a momentary lapse in judgment. It was part of a pattern, one that his employers had repeatedly excused or concealed. "Forward all of that information to our legal department," she said finally. "After I've handled the Miller acquisition, I want to address this situation properly, not just for my sake, but for everyone else who might encounter him in the future." Marcus nodded, already typing on his phone. "What are you planning? A formal complaint to the charter company?" "That and more," Alicia replied, her voice steady and determined. "Men like Davidson continue to behave this way because they face minimal consequences. I intend to change that." She turned her attention back to her phone call, connecting with Jack, her lead attorney in San Francisco. "Jack, it's Alicia. I'll be arriving at approximately 1:40 p.m. What's the situation with the board meeting?" Jack's voice came through clearly despite the background noise of the helicopter. "They're still scheduled to start at 1:30, but I've managed to convince Robert to begin with some procedural matters. He can probably stall for about 20 minutes before they have to address the acquisition offers." "That should be enough time," Alicia said. "Have you seen the details of Chen Technologies' counteroffer?" "Yes, and it's aggressive," Jack replied. "They're offering an additional $200 million above our last bid, with promises of maintaining the current management structure and research priorities." Alicia processed this information quickly. Chen Technologies was playing to the Miller Group's concerns about autonomy post-acquisition, something they had emphasized during previous negotiations. But Alicia had anticipated this move and had already prepared her counter-strategy. "Pull up the contingency package we prepared last month," she instructed. "The one with the research endowment and expanded development autonomy. I want that ready to present the moment I arrive." "Will do," Jack confirmed. "Anything else?" "Yes, make sure all board members have received the financial projections we prepared. I want them to have those numbers fresh in their minds when I walk in." After ending the call, Alicia turned to Marcus. "We need to review the presentation one more time. If Chen Technologies is pushing this hard, we need to be perfectly prepared." For the next 40 minutes, they worked steadily, refining talking points and reviewing key financial data. Captain Chen maintained a smooth flight path, occasionally updating them on their progress. The landscape below gradually transformed from desert to the more populous regions of Northern California. "Ms. Winters," Chen called back from the cockpit, "we're about 20 minutes out from San Francisco. We'll be encountering some urban air traffic soon, so there might be slight delays." Alicia acknowledged the update with a nod, then returned to her work. The acquisition had been her focus for months, the culmination of a strategy designed to position Winters' innovations at the forefront of artificial intelligence research. She had pursued the Miller Group not just for their impressive revenue streams, but for their groundbreaking work in machine learning algorithms, technology that would integrate perfectly with her company's existing products. The Miller Group's founder, Dr. Richard Miller, had been initially resistant to the idea of an acquisition, protective of the company he had built from the ground up. But over time, Alicia had won his trust, demonstrating that her vision for the future aligned with his own. Now, with Dr. Miller's support secured, It was the board she needed to convince, a board that was clearly entertaining other options. "Traffic update," Chen announced. "There's a slight congestion at the primary heliport. We may need to circle for a few minutes before we're cleared to land." Alicia checked her watch. 1:25 p.m. Even a short delay could jeopardize their tight timeline. "Is there an alternate landing site we could use?" she asked, leaning forward in her seat. Chen considered for a moment. "There's a secondary helipad about 6 blocks further from your destination. It's less busy, but it would add to your ground transportation time." Alicia quickly calculated the trade-off. "Let's go with the secondary location. I'd rather be on the ground and moving than circling in the air." Chen nodded, adjusting their course slightly. "Good call. I'll radio ahead and secure clearance." As the helicopter banked toward their new destination, Alicia gazed out at the San Francisco skyline coming into view through the clouds. The gleaming towers of the financial district rose like silver monoliths, and among them, the distinctive glass facade of the Miller Group headquarters, so close yet still too far. And somewhere in that building, a board meeting was about to begin that would determine the future of her company's most ambitious expansion to date. The helicopter began its descent, the city growing larger beneath them. Alicia felt the familiar sensation of her ears popping with the change in altitude. Marcus was already on his phone, arranging for a car to meet them at the secondary helipad. "Vehicle will be waiting when we land," he confirmed. "It's about a 12-minute drive to the Miller Group offices from there." Alicia nodded, her mind already rehearsing her opening remarks to the board. She would need to be compelling, authoritative, and above all, convince them that her vision for their company's future was superior to whatever Chen Technologies was offering. As they continued their descent, a movement caught her eye. Another helicopter, smaller than theirs, ascending rapidly from somewhere near the financial district. "Is that normal?" she asked Captain Chen, pointing to the other aircraft. Chen glanced in the direction she indicated, her expression changing from professional focus to concern. "That's not following standard flight patterns for this airspace," she remarked, reaching for her radio. "San Francisco Tower, this is Falcon Hilo 3 on approach to secondary helipad. Can you confirm traffic in our vicinity?" There was a brief crackle of static, then a response that Alicia couldn't quite make out. Whatever the tower said, it caused Chen's frown to deepen. "Unidentified aircraft," she muttered. "That's not good." She turned slightly in her seat. "Ms. Winters, please make sure your seatbelt is secure. We may need to alter our approach." The other helicopter was now moving laterally across their intended flight path, maintaining an altitude that would intersect with their descent if both aircraft continued on their current trajectories. "Tower is attempting to contact them now," Chen reported, her hands steady on the controls as she adjusted their course to create more distance. "This isn't necessarily a threat, but it's definitely irregular." Alicia tightened her seatbelt, an uneasy feeling settling in her stomach. After everything that had happened with Davidson, she couldn't help but wonder if this was another attempt to prevent her from reaching her destination. "Can you see who's piloting it?" she asked, straining to get a better view of the other aircraft. Chen shook her head. "Too far away, and the sun's reflection on their windshield makes it difficult to see inside." The tower's voice came through the radio again, this time with a note of urgency that was unmistakable even through the static. Chen responded quickly, her professionalism evident in her calm, precise communications. "Change of plans," she announced after signing off. "That aircraft isn't responding to tower communications. We're being directed to hold position temporarily while they sort this out." "Hold position?" Alicia repeated, alarm creeping into her voice. "For how long?" "Shouldn't be more than a few minutes," Chen replied, though her tone suggested she was less than certain. As they hovered, the unidentified helicopter continued its erratic path, now making a wide arc, that would bring it back toward their position. "That's deliberate," Marcus said, his eyes tracking the other aircraft. "They're circling back toward us." Chen's posture tensed. "Tower, the unidentified aircraft appears to be on an intercept course with us. Request immediate clearance to proceed to landing." There was a pause, then a burst of communication from the tower. Chen's expression darkened as she listened. "Understood," she replied finally. "Falcon Hilo 3 complying." She turned to address Alicia and Marcus. "We're being directed to an alternative landing site, further from the city center. The authorities are scrambling response units to intercept the unidentified aircraft." Alicia felt a surge of frustration. "How much further?" Chen hesitated, clearly reluctant to deliver bad news. "About 20 minutes from your destination by car." Marcus checked his watch. "That would put us at the Miller Group offices around 2:10 p.m. at the earliest." Too late. The board would already be deep into their deliberations by then, possibly even reaching a decision. Alicia's mind raced, seeking alternatives. "Is there any other option?" she asked, her voice tight with urgency. Before Chen could respond, the radio crackled to life again. The tower's message was brief but clear in its implications. "The unidentified aircraft has been identified," Chen reported, her voice grim. "It's registered to Premier Charter Services, the same company that employed Davidson." Alicia and Marcus exchanged a look of disbelief. "Is Davidson—" Marcus began. "No," Chen replied, checking a display on her instrument panel. "According to the tower, the pilot has identified himself as—" She paused, listening to another burst of radio communication, then turned to Alicia with an expression of grim confirmation. "It's Captain James Davidson," she said, "and he's demanding to speak with you." The helicopter cabin fell silent, save for the steady thrum of the rotors. Alicia stared at Captain Chen, momentarily speechless. The audacity was stunning. Davidson had somehow acquired another aircraft and followed them to San Francisco, effectively stalking her through the sky. "How is this possible?" Marcus finally asked, his voice strained with disbelief. "He was at the airport in Nevada less than 2 hours ago." Chen shook her head, her expression grim. "Premier Charter has multiple aircraft. He must have contacted another pilot or had someone prepare a helicopter immediately after we left." "This is insane," Marcus muttered. Alicia's mind raced through the implications. This wasn't just unprofessional behavior anymore. It had crossed into something much more disturbing. An obsessive determination to prevent her from reaching her destination. "What exactly is he demanding?" she asked Chen, her voice remarkably steady despite the circumstances. Chen pressed a button on her control panel. "Tower has patched him through to our frequency. You can hear for yourself." She adjusted a dial. "Captain Davidson, this is Falcon Hilo 3. We're receiving you now." There was a burst of static. Then Davidson's voice filled their headsets, the barely contained rage evident even through the electronic distortion. "Ms. Winters," he said, bypassing any greeting to Chen. "You left without proper authorization. Your charter flight is still under my command, and you're in breach of contract by abandoning it." It was such a blatant lie that Alicia almost laughed despite the gravity of the situation. "Captain Davidson," she replied evenly, "I was informed that our aircraft required repairs that would take until tomorrow. As a passenger, I'm under no obligation to wait when alternative transportation is available. You don't understand how this works," Davidson snapped, his voice rising. "When you charter a private jet, you don't get to just hop off and take another aircraft whenever you feel like it. There are protocols, agreements." "Which I've violated in no way," Alicia interrupted. "Now, if you'll excuse us, we're on approach to our landing site." "I'm not finished." Davidson's voice cracked with fury. "You think you can just humiliate me and walk away? Do you know what you've done? That first officer, Reynolds, he reported me. My career is on the line because of you. The irrationality of blaming her for his own actions was breathtaking. Alicia exchanged a glance with Marcus, who shook his head in disbelief. Captain Davidson, Alicia replied, her tone deliberately formal. Any consequences you're facing are the result of your own behavior. You abandoned your professional responsibilities when you attempted to sabotage my schedule with a fabricated mechanical issue. You further compounded that by firing a warning flare at our departing helicopter. Now you're pursuing us in another aircraft and making threats. Each of these actions was your choice. Davidson's response was immediate and venomous. Don't lecture me about choices, Ms. Winters. You people always think you're so much better than everyone else, don't you? Getting special treatment, taking positions you haven't earned. Captain, Chen cut in sharply. This communication is being recorded and monitored by San Francisco Tower. I suggest you consider your next words very carefully. There was a moment of silence, as if Davidson had momentarily forgotten that others were listening. When he spoke again, his voice was lower, but no less intense. All I'm saying is that Ms. Winters needs to return to Carson City and complete her journey on her originally chartered aircraft once repairs are complete. That's the proper procedure. Chen shook her head in disbelief. That's not accurate, and you know it. Ms. Winters has every right to arrange alternative transportation. She's interfering with an active charter contract, Davidson insisted. Tower, this is Falcon Hilo 3, Chen said, deliberately changing channels. The unidentified aircraft is making unreasonable demands and appears to be harassing our client. We request immediate assistance. The tower's response was prompt. Falcon Hilo 3, we're dispatching police helicopters to your location. Continue to your designated landing site. We've instructed the other aircraft to maintain distance. Chen acknowledged the tower, then turned slightly in her seat. Ms. Winters, I'm going to proceed to the alternative landing site as directed. The authorities will handle Captain Davidson. Alicia nodded, trying to focus on the immediate problem, reaching the Miller Group offices in time for the board meeting. How quickly can we get there from the new landing site? It's in a more remote location, Chen replied apologetically. You're looking at about 25 minutes by car to reach the financial district. Alicia checked her watch again. 1:35 p.m. Even if they landed immediately, she wouldn't reach the Miller Group offices until after 2:00 p.m. The board would already be well into their deliberations by then, possibly even voting on the competing offers. I need to call Jack again, she said to Marcus, reaching for her phone. Before she could dial, however, Davidson's voice burst through their headsets again, this time on the emergency channel that couldn't be muted. You're not going to make it to that meeting, Ms. Winters, he said, the threatening undercurrent in his voice unmistakable. One way or another, I'm going to make sure of that. Chen's expression hardened. Captain Davidson, you are in violation of multiple FAA regulations. Cease this communication immediately and return to your designated airspace. Davidson ignored her. You think you're so clever, don't you, using your money and connections to get whatever you want, but up here none of that matters. Through the window, Alicia could see his helicopter maneuvering closer, now flying parallel to their course about 100 yards away. The proximity was unsettling, especially given Davidson's increasingly erratic behavior. He's too close, Chen muttered, adjusting their course slightly to increase the distance between the aircraft. Tower, the unidentified helicopter is violating safe distance protocols. As the tower responded with more urgent instructions for Davidson to alter his course, Alicia's phone buzzed with an incoming call. It was Jack, her attorney. Jack, she answered, trying to keep her voice calm despite the chaos unfolding around her. What's happening at the meeting? They've started, Jack replied, the tension in his voice palpable. Robert postponed the acquisition discussion as long as he could, but the board demanded they move forward. Chen Technologies has their representative here making their pitch right now. Where are you? We've encountered complications, Alicia said, glancing at Davidson's helicopter still pacing them. I'm still about 30 minutes out. There was a pause, then Jack's voice, lower now. Alicia, I don't think I can stall them that long. The board is leaning toward Chen's offer. They're offering assurances about research autonomy that are very appealing to the senior scientists. Alicia closed her eyes briefly, her mind racing through options. Put me on speakerphone, she decided. I'll address the board remotely until I can get there in person. I'll try, Jack said. But Walter Chen is in full sales mode right now. He's brought his entire executive team. Of course he had. Walter Chen, CEO of Chen Technologies and Alicia's most aggressive competitor, was known for his theatrical presentations and overwhelming approach to negotiations. He would have prepared meticulously for this opportunity. Do whatever you can, Alicia urged. I need 10 minutes with that board before they vote. As she ended the call, a sudden jolt rocked their helicopter. Chen cursed under her breath, her hands moving swiftly over the controls. What was that? Marcus asked, his voice tight with alarm. Air turbulence, Chen replied, though her expression suggested something else. She glanced pointedly at Davidson's helicopter, which had moved even closer. Very localized air turbulence. Alicia understood immediately. Davidson was deliberately flying close enough for his rotor wash to affect their aircraft, not close enough to cause a catastrophic failure, but enough to create a dangerous disturbance. Tower, this is an emergency, Chen said into her radio, her voice controlled but urgent. The unidentified helicopter is creating dangerous flight conditions. We need immediate intervention. Davidson's voice cut through again. Just a little turbulence, Captain Chen. Nothing an experienced pilot can't handle, unless you're not as qualified as you think you are. The sexist implication was clear, and Chen's jaw tightened in response. But she remained focused on flying, her professionalism unwavering despite the provocation. Police air units are 3 minutes out, she informed Alicia and Marcus. I'm going to attempt to increase our distance from Davidson in the meantime. As Chen maneuvered their helicopter into a different flight path, Alicia's phone rang again. It was Jack. I've convinced them to put you on speaker, he said without preamble. They're willing to hear you for 5 minutes before continuing their deliberations. You're on in 30 seconds. Alicia straightened in her seat, mentally shifting gears from the immediate danger to the critical business at hand. This was what she had built her career on, the ability to perform under pressure, to remain clear-headed when others would falter. Marcus, take notes, she said quietly, receiving a nod in response. Then into the phone. I'm ready, Jack. She could hear the muffled sounds of the boardroom on the other end of the line, chairs shifting, papers rustling, the low murmur of voices. Then Jack's voice, more formal now. Ladies and gentlemen of the board, I have Alicia Winters, CEO of Winters Innovations, on the line to address you regarding the proposed acquisition. Alicia took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice clear and commanding despite the circumstances. Members of the board, thank you for this opportunity. I apologize for not being there in person, but I'm currently en route and facing some unexpected travel complications. There was a faint ripple of laughter from the other end, which Alicia chose to ignore. I understand you've just heard from Chen Technologies about their offer. What I want to emphasize today is not just the financial aspects of our proposal, which you've all reviewed, but the vision we bring to this partnership. As she spoke, laying out her strategic vision for integrating the Miller Group's research capabilities with Winters Innovations' global infrastructure, she was acutely aware of the helicopter still pacing them through the sky, but she compartmentalized, focusing entirely on the task at hand. The Miller Group has always been at the forefront of AI research, she continued. What we offer is not just capital, but a commitment to preserving that innovative spirit. Our proposal includes the establishment of an autonomous research division, fully funded for the next decade, with Dr. Miller continuing to lead the scientific direction. She was hitting her stride now, the words flowing with conviction and clarity. This was her element, articulating a vision, persuading others to see what she saw. Even with Davidson's helicopter hovering menacingly nearby, even with the clock ticking inexorably toward a decision that could reshape her company's future, Alicia found herself centered in this moment of pure business strategy. A sudden gasp from Marcus broke her concentration. She glanced up to see Davidson's helicopter cutting directly across their flight path, missing them by mere yards, a maneuver so reckless it bordered on suicidal. "Tower emergency!" Chen shouted into her radio. "The unidentified aircraft just executed an extremely dangerous crossing maneuver. We nearly collided." Alicia's heart hammered in her chest, but she kept the phone pressed to her ear, unwilling to let the board hear the chaos unfolding around her. "As I was saying," she continued, her voice remarkably steady, "our commitment extends beyond the financial terms. We're prepared to establish a $50 million research grant in the Miller Group's name, focused on developing ethical AI applications for underserved communities." Through the window, she could see Davidson's helicopter circling back around, its movements erratic and unpredictable. Captain Chen was fully focused on maintaining control of their aircraft, her posture tense, but her hands steady on the controls. "Ms. Winters," a new voice came through the phone, Walter Chen himself, his tone dripping with false concern. "You sound distracted. Perhaps this discussion would be better postponed until you can join us in person." It was a calculated move, designed to make her appear unprepared or uncommitted. Alicia refused to take the bait. "Not at all, Mr. Chen," she replied smoothly. "I'm fully engaged and committed to this discussion. In fact, I'd like to address some of the points you raised about research autonomy." She continued her presentation, methodically addressing each of the concerns that Chen had likely raised. As she spoke, she watched Chen speaking urgently into her radio, coordinating with the approaching police helicopters that were now visible in the distance. Alicia was nearing the conclusion of her remarks when Davidson's voice burst through their headsets again, this time with an edge of desperation that hadn't been there before. "This is your last chance, Ms. Winters," he said. "Order your pilot to turn around now, or I'll be forced to take more direct action." Chen's response was immediate and firm. "Captain Davidson, police air units are 30 seconds from your position. Stand down immediately." Davidson laughed, the sound harsh and unhinged. "They won't catch me. I'm the best pilot Premier Charter has ever had. You think I can't outfly a couple of police helicopters?" As he spoke, his aircraft banked sharply, positioning itself directly in front of them, blocking their path forward. Chen was forced to reduce speed rapidly, causing the helicopter to shudder. "What's happening?" Jack's voice came through the phone, tension evident in his tone. "Alicia, are you there?" "I'm still here," she replied, struggling to maintain her composure. "Just experiencing some turbulence. Now, regarding the intellectual property considerations..." But her words were cut short as Davidson executed his most dangerous maneuver yet, bringing his helicopter to a hover, directly in their flight path, forcing Chen to bank sharply to avoid a collision. "That's it," Chen said, her voice tight with controlled fury. "Tower, we have a direct threat to our aircraft. Request immediate authorization for emergency landing procedures." As the tower responded with urgent instructions, 2 police helicopters appeared, rapidly closing in on Davidson's position. For a moment it seemed he might attempt to flee. Instead, to Alicia's shock, he turned his helicopter to face theirs directly. Hovering less than 50 yards away, the 2 aircraft now suspended in a high-stakes standoff above the San Francisco Bay. Through the windshield, Alicia could see Davidson clearly for the first time since they'd left Nevada. His face was contorted with rage, his gestures animated as he shouted into his radio. "You've ruined everything," his voice crackled through their headsets. "People like you always do, think you're so special, so entitled, but I'm not finished yet." The police helicopters were closing in from both sides, their loudspeakers now audible, ordering Davidson to cease his aggressive maneuvers and proceed to a designated landing area. "Ms. Winters?" A voice came through her phone. Dr. Miller himself, the founder of the company she was trying to acquire. "What exactly is going on? We can hear helicopter announcements in the background." Before Alicia could respond, Davidson made his final, most reckless move. His helicopter lurched forward directly toward them, only to veer off at the last possible second, creating a violent wake of turbulence that sent their aircraft pitching wildly. "Mayday! Mayday!" Chen called out, fighting the controls as alarms blared throughout the cockpit. "We've lost primary hydraulics." The helicopter began to spin, the world outside the windows becoming a disorienting blur of sky and city and water. Alicia's phone flew from her hand as she gripped her seat, her heart pounding in her chest. Through the chaos, she could hear Marcus shouting, Chen's voice calling out emergency procedures, and somewhere in the distance the wail of sirens. Davidson's helicopter was nowhere to be seen, but the damage was done. They were going down, spinning toward the cold waters of San Francisco Bay, and in that moment, Alicia realized that Davidson had succeeded in his goal. She wouldn't be making it to the Miller Group meeting after all. But as Captain Chen fought to regain control of their failing aircraft, Alicia's mind was already racing ahead, formulating a new plan. Because if there was one thing she had learned in building her empire from the ground up, it was this: setbacks were inevitable, but surrender was not an option. Time seemed to slow as the helicopter continued its uncontrolled descent. Alicia could hear Captain Chen's voice, calm yet urgent, as she fought with the controls, trying to stabilize their spin. Warning lights flashed across the instrument panel and alarms blared through the cabin. "Brace for impact!" Chen shouted, her hands moving with practiced precision over the controls. "Emergency water landing!" Alicia tightened her grip on the seat restraints, her eyes meeting Marcus's across the cabin. His face was pale, but he gave her a slight nod, a silent acknowledgement of their shared predicament and determination. The bay's surface rushed up to meet them, the water glistening in the early afternoon sun. Alicia took a deep breath and closed her eyes, preparing for the impact. In those final seconds before they hit, a strange calmness washed over her, the same mental clarity she had often experienced during the most critical moments of her business career. The helicopter hit the water with a tremendous jolt, the impact forcing the air from Alicia's lungs. There was a horrible screeching of metal, then the cold rush of water as the bay began to seep into the cabin through seams torn open by the crash. "Everyone out," Chen commanded, already unbuckling her harness and moving to the side door. "We have minutes before she sinks." The helicopter was partially submerged, tilting precariously to one side. Water was flowing in rapidly, already ankle-deep in the cabin. Alicia released her seatbelt and immediately reached to help Marcus, whose hands were shaking too badly to release his own restraints. "We're going to be fine," she told him firmly, her voice steadier than she felt. Outside, the police helicopters hovered overhead, their spotlights trained on the sinking aircraft. One descended lower, a rescue diver already preparing to jump. Chen managed to force the side door open against the pressure of the incoming water. "Life jackets are under your seats," she instructed, grabbing her own and quickly securing it. "Put them on and swim clear of the aircraft." Alicia helped Marcus with his life jacket before donning her own, the water now rising past their knees. The cold was shocking, seeping through her tailored suit and chilling her to the bone. "Ladies first," Marcus said, gesturing toward the open door. Despite everything, Alicia smiled. "Not a chance, we go together." They moved as quickly as they could through the rising water, following Chen to the open door. Outside, the bay stretched in every direction, the San Francisco shoreline visible but dauntingly distant. "Coast Guard's on the way," Chen reported, checking a waterproof radio she'd grabbed from the cockpit. "And the police air units have deployed rescue swimmers. We just need to get clear of the helicopter before it fully submerges." Taking a deep breath, Alicia plunged into the bay. The water was brutally cold, instantly soaking through her clothes and weighing her down. But the life jacket did its job, keeping her afloat as she kicked away from the sinking helicopter. Chen and Marcus surfaced nearby, both swimming strongly away from the aircraft. Above them, the police helicopters maintained their positions, their rescue divers now in the water and moving toward them. Alicia looked back just in time to see their helicopter slip beneath the surface, disappearing into the depths of the bay with a final burble of escaping air. The sight sent a shiver through her that had nothing to do with the cold water. They had escaped with mere minutes to spare. A rescue diver reached her first, his expression professional but concerned. "Ms. Winters, are you injured?" "I'm fine," she replied, though her teeth were beginning to chatter from the cold. "Help my colleagues first." The diver nodded but stayed with her as additional rescuers reached Marcus and Chen. Within minutes, they were being hoisted one by one into the hovering police helicopter, emergency blankets wrapped around their shivering forms. Inside the police helicopter, Alicia found herself seated between Marcus and Chen, all three of them dripping wet and wrapped in silver thermal blankets. A paramedic moved among them, checking vital signs and offering words of reassurance. "What happened to Davidson?" Alicia asked the police officer seated across from her. The officer's expression darkened. "We're in pursuit. He fled the scene after forcing your aircraft down, but he won't get far. Every law enforcement agency in the Bay Area has been alerted, and the FAA has declared him a flight risk. His transponder is still active, so we're tracking him." Alicia nodded, trying to absorb this information through the fog of shock and adrenaline. "He deliberately caused us to crash," she said, her voice steady despite her shivering. "He should be charged accordingly." "We have the entire incident on radar," the officer assured her, "and the air traffic control recordings. He'll face serious charges, ma'am." Alicia turned to Captain Chen, who was speaking quietly with another officer, providing technical details of the incident. "Thank you," she said simply when Chen finished her account. "Your skills saved our lives today." Chen shook her head, dismissing the praise. "I did what any pilot would do. But I've never seen anything like Davidson's behavior in all my years of flying. It was beyond unprofessional. It was deranged." "Where are we headed now?" Marcus asked the officer, huddling deeper into his blanket. "San Francisco General Hospital," the officer replied. "Standard procedure after a water rescue. You'll all need to be checked for hypothermia and any injuries you might not be aware of due to shock." Alicia's mind immediately shifted back to the Miller Group acquisition. She checked her wrist reflexively, but her watch, a timepiece worth more than most people's cars, had stopped functioning in the salt water. "What time is it?" she asked. "Just after 2:15 p.m., ma'am," the officer replied, checking his own watch. The board meeting would be well underway by now, possibly even concluding. Without her phone, which had been lost in the crash, she had no way to contact Jack or her legal team. The acquisition she had worked toward for months, the deal that would transform her company's future, was slipping away while she sat dripping and shivering in a rescue helicopter. "I need to make a call as soon as possible," she told the officer. "It's urgent business." The officer hesitated, then nodded. "We'll be landing at the hospital in about 10 minutes. I can lend you my phone once we're on the ground." Those 10 minutes felt like an eternity. Alicia's mind raced through scenarios, calculating options and contingencies. The Miller Group board would have heard the beginning of her presentation, then the sounds of the helicopter in distress before she lost her phone. They might assume the worst, or they might simply proceed with their deliberations, viewing her absence as a lack of commitment to the deal. Walter Chen, her competitor, would undoubtedly capitalize on the situation, presenting himself as the stable, reliable option in contrast to her dramatic circumstances. It was exactly the kind of opportunity he excelled at exploiting. As the helicopter began its descent toward the hospital helipad, Alicia turned to Marcus. "As soon as we land, I need you to contact Jack. Tell him I'm safe but delayed. The board needs to know that our offer stands, and that I'll be there as soon as medically cleared." Marcus nodded, his professional demeanor reasserting itself despite his bedraggled appearance. "What about Davidson?" Alicia's expression hardened. "He'll be dealt with, but not by us. Not right now. Our priority is salvaging the Miller acquisition. We can address Davidson's actions once that's secured." The helicopter touched down on the hospital helipad with a gentle bump. Medical personnel rushed forward with wheelchairs and additional blankets, prepared to receive the water rescue patients. True to his word, the police officer handed Alicia his phone as they were being helped onto the helipad. She dialed Jack's number from memory, her fingers still stiff with cold. "Jack Lawson," came the response after 2 rings. "Jack, it's Alicia. I'm all right, but there's been an incident. Our helicopter was forced down into the bay." There was a moment of stunned silence before Jack replied. "My God, Alicia, are you hurt? We heard the commotion over the phone, then nothing. The board has been in recess for the past 30 minutes waiting for news." A surge of relief washed over her. "They're still there? They haven't voted?" "No votes yet," Jack confirmed. "Dr. Miller insisted they wait for confirmation of your safety before proceeding. But Walter Chen is pushing hard for a decision, arguing that the delay is costing the company value by the minute." Of course he was. Chen was nothing if not opportunistic. "Tell them I'm at San Francisco General being checked for hypothermia, but I'll be there as soon as the doctors clear me. I'm estimating 2 hours, maximum." "I'll let them know," Jack said. "For what it's worth, your partial presentation made an impact. Several board members were asking pointed questions about Chen's offer after you were cut off." "Good," Alicia said, allowing herself a small smile. "And Jack? Tell Dr. Miller that I appreciate his concern. It means a lot." As she handed the phone back to the officer, a hospital orderly approached with a wheelchair. "Ms. Winters, we need to get you inside for examination." Alicia nodded, but before allowing herself to be wheeled away, she turned to Captain Chen, who was speaking with what appeared to be federal agents, likely FAA investigators based on their insignia. "Captain Chen," she called, "once you're cleared, please come find me. I'd like to discuss your future employment options." Chen looked surprised but nodded. "I'll do that, Ms. Winters." The hospital's emergency department was a flurry of activity, but Alicia and her companions were quickly ushered into private examination rooms. A doctor, a young woman with a kind face and efficient manner, checked Alicia's vital signs and examined her for injuries. "You're suffering from mild hypothermia, Ms. Winters, but otherwise you appear to be in remarkably good condition given what you've just been through," the doctor told her. "We'll want to warm you up properly and keep you under observation for a few hours, but I don't anticipate any complications." "I need to leave as soon as possible," Alicia replied. "I have an extremely important meeting that can't wait." The doctor frowned. "Ms. Winters, you've just survived a helicopter crash. Your body has undergone significant trauma, even if you're not feeling it yet due to adrenaline. I strongly advise against leaving for at least 3 hours." Alicia was about to argue when her attention was caught by the television mounted in the corner of the examination room. The screen showed aerial footage of the bay, specifically the spot where their helicopter had gone down. Rescue boats were visible, and a news crawler along the bottom read, "Breaking. CEO Alicia Winters survives helicopter crash in SF Bay. Suspect pilot still at large." "Can you turn that up?" she asked the doctor, who obliged with a press of the remote. Sources confirm that tech billionaire Alicia Winters was aboard the helicopter that was forced down into San Francisco Bay approximately 40 minutes ago, the news anchor was saying. Early reports suggest that another aircraft, piloted by Captain James Davidson, deliberately interfered with Winters' flight, causing the emergency landing in the water. All 3 occupants of Winters' helicopter were rescued without serious injury. The FAA and FBI have launched investigations, and a manhunt is currently underway for Davidson, who fled the scene after the incident. The footage switched to a press conference where an FBI agent was addressing reporters. "We are treating this as an attempted assault with a deadly weapon, possibly motivated by bias. Captain Davidson remains at large, but we have every reason to believe he will be apprehended shortly." Alicia watched in silence, processing the fact that her private ordeal had already become breaking news. In the business world, perception was often as important as reality, and right now, the perception was that she had survived an attempt on her life and was still standing. That kind of narrative carried weight, especially in the high-stakes world of corporate acquisitions. A nurse entered with dry hospital scrubs. "Your clothes are being dried, Ms. Winters, but they're quite damaged from the salt water. We thought you might be more comfortable in these for now." "Thank you," Alicia said, accepting the plain blue garments. "But I'll need something more appropriate for a business meeting. Is there any way to arrange for suitable clothes to be delivered here?" The nurse looked uncertain, but Marcus's voice came from the doorway. "Already handled," he said, his own wet suit replaced with hospital scrubs. "I've contacted our San Francisco office. They're sending over appropriate attire for both of us, along with new phones and a secure laptop. Should be here within the hour." Alicia smiled gratefully. This was why Marcus was invaluable. He anticipated needs before they were even articulated. "The doctors want me to stay for observation," she told him, "but the Miller Group board is waiting. We need to get there as soon as possible." Marcus nodded. "I've been in touch with Jack. The board has agreed to reconvene at 4:30 p.m. specifically to hear your full presentation." Dr. Miller apparently made quite an impassioned speech about not letting criminal intimidation influence their business decisions. Another piece of good news. Dr. Miller's support would be crucial in swaying the board, especially given the dramatic circumstances. "And what about Davidson?" Alicia asked. "Any update on his location?" Marcus's expression darkened. "Still at large, but they've tracked his helicopter to Oakland. It's only a matter of time before they find him." As if on cue, the television in the corner updated its breaking news chyron. Suspect pilot James Davidson cornered in Oakland warehouse, standoff with police underway. The camera showed a police perimeter established around an industrial area, with tactical teams taking positions and helicopters circling overhead. "He won't escape," Marcus said quietly, "not with this level of response." Alicia nodded, but her mind was already moving past Davidson and focusing on the challenge ahead. She had approximately 2 hours to recover, prepare, and present a compelling case to the Miller Group board, all while dealing with the physical and emotional aftermath of a near-death experience. Most people would consider postponing the meeting, taking time to recover properly. But Alicia hadn't built a tech empire by backing down from challenges. If anything, the crash had only strengthened her resolve. Davidson had tried to stop her with discrimination, sabotage, and ultimately violence. He had failed. And she was going to make sure that every person in that boardroom understood exactly what that failure meant. Alicia Winters could not be intimidated, could not be deterred, and would not be denied her rightful place at the table, not by Davidson, not by Walter Chen, not by anyone. A soft knock at the door drew her attention. Captain Chen stood there, also dressed in hospital scrubs, her professional demeanor intact despite the circumstances. "Ms. Winters," she said, "you wanted to see me?" Alicia gestured for her to enter. Captain Chen, I believe I mentioned something about future employment options before we were separated. Captain Chen stepped into the room, her posture still military straight despite the baggy hospital scrubs and the ordeal they'd just endured. Only the damp hair plastered to her forehead betrayed what she'd been through. You handled that emergency landing brilliantly, Alicia said without preamble. Your skills saved our lives. Chen shook her head modestly. I was just doing my job, Ms. Winters. Please call me Alicia. She gestured to a chair near the hospital bed. And doing your job with exceptional skill is exactly what interests me. Winters Innovations currently charters aircraft, but I've been considering establishing our own corporate flight department. We need pilots who perform under pressure, who remain professional regardless of the circumstances. Chen's eyebrows rose slightly. You're offering me a job? Now, after what we just went through? I make my best decisions under pressure, Alicia replied with a small smile. And I've just witnessed firsthand how you operate during a crisis. That's information I couldn't get from any interview or resume. Chen hesitated, clearly processing the unexpected offer. I'm flattered, but I should tell you that I'm already fielding calls from news outlets about today's incident. The FAA investigators also want a comprehensive statement. I'd expect nothing less, Alicia said. Complete transparency with authorities is essential. As for the media, that's your choice, though our PR team could provide guidance if desired. Marcus, who had been quietly observing from the doorway, added, Your testimony will be crucial in the case against Davidson. We have no interest in interfering with that process. Chen nodded, some of the tension leaving her shoulders. In that case, I'd be interested in hearing more about the position. My current employer is, well, let's just say they've had some quality control issues lately. Her dry tone made it clear she was referring to Davidson. Understatement of the year, Marcus muttered. Alicia smiled. Once this acquisition matter is resolved, we can discuss specifics. For now, consider it an open invitation. My business manager will contact you with details. Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity, Chen said, her professional demeanor softening slightly. And for what it's worth, I'm sorry about your meeting. Davidson seemed pathologically determined to prevent you from reaching it. He failed, Alicia said simply. And I intend to make his failure complete by securing this acquisition despite his interference. A nurse appeared in the doorway. Captain Chen, the federal investigators would like to continue your debriefing now. Chen nodded and rose from her chair. I should go. Good luck with your meeting, Alicia. I have a feeling you won't need it, though. With a respectful nod to both Alicia and Marcus, she followed the nurse out. Once they were alone, Marcus moved further into the room, his tablet now activated with a secure connection. Our clothes will be here in about 20 minutes. The doctors insist you stay another hour for observation, but I've arranged for a car to be waiting. The Miller Group board is still in session, with Walter Chen doing everything he can to force a vote before you arrive. He knows our offer is superior on its merits, Alicia said, sitting up straighter despite the protests of her aching body. That's why he's pushing so hard for an immediate decision. He's also using the incident to his advantage, Marcus added, turning his tablet to show her a business news site. Chen Technologies' PR team is already spinning a narrative about stability versus chaos and questioning whether a company that attracts such dramatic incidents is the right partner for the Miller Group. Alicia's lips thinned. Tasteless, but not unexpected. What's the public response been like? Overwhelmingly supportive of you, Marcus said, scrolling through various news sites. The attempted sabotage angle is dominating coverage. Business publications are framing it as a shocking example of the obstacles women of color still face in corporate America. Social media is trending with hashtags supporting you. Even your competitors, other than Chen, are expressing outrage. Despite everything, Alicia felt a flicker of satisfaction. Davidson's actions, meant to demean and diminish her, were instead highlighting exactly the kind of discrimination she had fought against throughout her career. The narrative was shifting from helicopter crash to successful CEO survives racist attack, and that shift would ripple through boardrooms across the country. "What's the latest on Davidson?" she asked, nodding toward the television where the news was still covering the Oakland standoff. Marcus grimaced. "Not good. He's barricaded himself in that warehouse and is refusing to come out. Police negotiators are trying to talk him down, but he's making wild accusations about you ruining his life and stealing his rightful position. It's being streamed live on several networks." Alicia shook her head, a mixture of disgust and pity crossing her face. "His issues clearly run deeper than I initially thought. The FBI is investigating his background more thoroughly now," Marcus added. "They've found concerning social media posts dating back years, extremist viewpoints, rants about reverse discrimination, conspiracy theories. The charter company is claiming they had no knowledge of these personal views." "Willful ignorance," Alicia said quietly. "They had complaints about his behavior, but chose to ignore the pattern. Now they'll face the consequences alongside him." The door opened again, this time admitting the doctor who had examined Alicia earlier. "Ms. Winters, your vital signs have improved, but I still recommend you stay for the full observation period. I understand your concern, doctor, but I have an unavoidable business commitment," Alicia replied firmly but politely. "I'll sign whatever waivers are necessary to leave early." The doctor frowned but seemed to recognize the futility of arguing. "At minimum, please stay until we've completed one more round of tests. That's another 40 minutes. If all looks well, I'll release you with instructions for follow-up care," Alicia calculated mentally. If she left in 40 minutes, she would arrive at the Miller Group offices around 4:15 p.m., still ahead of the rescheduled 4:30 meeting. "Agreed," she said. "Thank you," the doctor replied, visibly relieved. "A package has arrived for you at the reception desk. I'll have it brought in." After the doctor left, Marcus began preparing for their departure, arranging the secure car service and coordinating with Jack at the Miller Group offices. Alicia used the time to review the acquisition proposal on Marcus's tablet, refining her presentation strategy in light of the day's events. When their clothes arrived, a fresh navy suit for Alicia and a charcoal one for Marcus, along with all necessary accessories, they took turns changing in the small bathroom attached to the examination room. Despite the circumstances, Alicia felt her confidence returning as she donned the impeccably tailored suit. Appearance mattered in business negotiations, particularly for women, and particularly for women of color. She had learned long ago that her presentation needed to be flawless to be taken seriously. As she emerged from the bathroom, Marcus handed her a new smartphone, already configured with her essential contacts and information. "Everything's synchronized," he assured her. "And I've prepared a brief summary of media coverage so far in case the board members raise questions about today's incident." Alicia nodded her thanks, scrolling quickly through the prepared document. "This is good, very thorough." On the television, the standoff in Oakland was still the top story, but now a split screen showed footage of their helicopter being recovered from the bay. The news anchor's voice provided context. "The FAA has confirmed that the actions of Captain Davidson, currently in a standoff with police in Oakland, directly caused the emergency water landing of the helicopter carrying tech CEO Alicia Winters. Aviation experts are calling it one of the most egregious examples of reckless flying in commercial aviation history, with one analyst describing Davidson's maneuvers as essentially weaponizing an aircraft." Alicia muted the television. "We need to focus on the acquisition now, not Davidson. He's consumed enough of our attention today." The final medical tests were completed efficiently, and true to her word, The doctor signed Alicia's discharge papers at exactly the 40-minute mark. "You're remarkably resilient, Ms. Winters," she commented. "Most people would be in bed for days after what you've experienced." "I don't have that luxury today," Alicia replied with a small smile. "But I promise to rest properly once this business is concluded." As they were escorted through the hospital, Alicia noticed the stares and whispers from staff and patients who recognized her from the news coverage. By tomorrow, her face would be on every major business publication, the crash analyzed from every angle. She would need to make a public statement eventually, but for now, the Miller Group acquisition remained her priority. Their car, a sleek black Audi with darkened windows, was waiting at the hospital's private exit as arranged. The driver, a professional security specialist rather than a regular chauffeur, opened the door for them while scanning the surroundings with practiced vigilance. "The Miller Group offices, please," Marcus instructed as they settled into the car's plush leather seats. "And the fastest route possible." As they pulled away from the hospital, Alicia's phone rang, Jack calling with an update. "The board is taking a short recess," he reported. "Walter Chen just finished his presentation, and he's pulling out all the stops. Brought in his entire executive team, made some bold promises about research autonomy and funding." "What's your read on the room?" Alicia asked, her voice composed despite the stakes. "Divided," Jack replied honestly. "Chen's offer is financially aggressive, and he's positioning himself as the safe choice in light of today's events. But Dr. Miller is firmly in your corner, and he carries significant weight with the board." "We'll be there in 20 minutes, Alicia assured him. "Have everything ready for my presentation." As the call ended, Marcus gave her an appraising look. "How are you really feeling? And don't say fine. I've worked with you long enough to know when you're pushing through." Alicia appreciated his concern, but her focus was unwavering. "I'm running on adrenaline," she admitted. "Everything hurts, I'm exhausted, and part of me would love nothing more than to check into a hotel and sleep for 12 hours. But I've worked too hard and come too far to let Davidson's actions derail this deal." Marcus nodded, understanding perfectly. "For what it's worth, I think walking into that boardroom after what you've just survived will make quite an impression." "It's not about the impression," Alicia corrected gently. "It's about demonstrating, through actions rather than words, exactly the kind of determination and resilience Winters Innovations brings to every challenge. If we can handle Davidson, we can certainly navigate market fluctuations and competitive pressures." As they drove through downtown San Francisco, Alicia found herself thinking about the broader implications of the day's events. Davidson wasn't just one bigoted individual. He represented a mindset that had created obstacles for her throughout her career. People who couldn't accept that a black woman could build a multi-billion-dollar tech company through her own intellect and determination, who assumed she must have had special advantages or taken shortcuts. What Davidson had never understood, what none of them understood, was that each obstacle had only strengthened her resolve. Each dismissive comment, each skeptical investor, each competitor who underestimated her had become fuel for her ambition, proof that she needed to work harder and achieve more than anyone expected. Today would be no different. Davidson's attempt to derail her had failed spectacularly, and now she would channel that experience into securing the acquisition that would take Winters Innovations to the next level. The car pulled up to the Miller Group headquarters, a gleaming glass tower in the heart of San Francisco's financial district. News vans were parked outside, reporters standing ready with cameras and microphones hoping to catch a glimpse of the CEO who had survived a helicopter crash just hours earlier. "Are you ready for this?" Marcus asked as the driver came around to open their door. Alicia smoothed her suit jacket and lifted her chin slightly. "Absolutely." The moment they emerged from the car, the reporters surged forward, shouting questions. "Ms. Winters, Can you comment on the helicopter incident? Is it true Captain Davidson deliberately forced your aircraft down? Will you be pressing charges? Is the acquisition meeting still happening today? Alicia faced the cameras with practiced poise. I'll be making a full statement later. Right now, I have an important meeting to attend. With that, she turned and walked toward the building entrance, Marcus at her side creating a buffer between her and the most aggressive reporters. The Miller Group's security team met them at the door, escorting them directly to the express elevator that would take them to the top-floor boardroom. In the elevator, Alicia took a moment to center herself, breathing deeply and visualizing the successful outcome she was determined to achieve. Jack just texted, Marcus said quietly. They're reassembling the board now. Walter Chen is still there with his team. Good, Alicia replied. I want him to witness this. The elevator doors opened onto a reception area where Jack was waiting, his relief at seeing her evident in his expression. You made it, he said, stepping forward to greet her, and just in time. What's the situation? Alicia asked as they walked briskly toward the boardroom. Chen is pushing hard for an immediate vote, claiming further delay is irresponsible to shareholders, Jack reported. Dr. Miller has been your strongest advocate, insisting the board hear your full presentation before deciding. They paused outside the boardroom doors. Through the glass panels, Alicia could see the 12 board members seated around the massive table, Walter Chen standing at the far end with 2 of his executives, gesturing emphatically as he made some final point. Jack gave her a questioning look. Are you sure you're up for this? After what you've been through today, no one would blame you for postponing. Alicia straightened her shoulders, her expression resolute. Davidson didn't stop me. Chen won't either. With that, she pushed open the doors and strode into the boardroom, her presence immediately commanding attention. Walter Chen stopped mid-sentence, his expression shifting from confidence to shock as he registered Alicia's arrival. The board members turned as one, their reactions ranging from surprise to admiration to frank curiosity. Dr. Miller, seated at the head of the table, stood immediately, a smile of genuine relief crossing his face. Ms. Winters, he said warmly, we're very glad to see you safe and well. Alicia stepped forward, her gaze sweeping the room with quiet authority. Thank you, Dr. Miller, members of the board. I apologize for the delay, but as you may have heard, there were some unexpected complications with my travel arrangements. A ripple of amazed laughter broke the tension in the room. Walter Chen remained frozen at the far end, his prepared victory speech now forgotten as he watched the woman he had assumed would never make it to this meeting take center stage. Dr. Miller gestured to the presentation area. We're eager to hear your full proposal, Ms. Winters, particularly in light of the extraordinary circumstances. Alicia moved to the front of the room with graceful determination, passing Walter Chen without sparing him a glance. As Marcus set up their presentation materials, she turned to face the board, her expression revealing nothing of the pain and exhaustion she felt, only the unwavering confidence that had built her empire. Ladies and gentlemen, she began, her voice strong and clear, today I want to discuss not just an acquisition, but a vision for the future. A future where the groundbreaking research of the Miller Group combines with the global reach of Winters innovations to transform what's possible in artificial intelligence. She paused, making eye contact with each board member in turn before continuing. And if there's one thing today has demonstrated, it's that when faced with obstacles, no matter how extreme, Winters Innovations doesn't just persevere, we prevail. For the next 45 minutes, Alicia commanded the boardroom with the precision of a maestro conducting a symphony. Her presentation was flawlessly executed, each point building upon the last to create a compelling vision of what the Miller Group could become under Winters Innovations' leadership. She moved seamlessly between technical details and broader strategic insights, her command of the material so complete that it seemed impossible she had just survived a helicopter crash hours earlier. The only hints of her ordeal were a slight stiffness in her movements and the occasional discreet wince when she shifted position too quickly. The synergies between our organizations extend far beyond financial projections, she explained, gesturing toward a slide showing the integration of their respective technologies. The Miller Group's breakthrough work in neural network architecture, combined with our quantum processing innovations, creates possibilities that neither company could achieve independently. From his position at the far end of the table, Walter Chen watched with poorly concealed dismay as Alicia systematically dismantled every argument he had made during his own presentation. His confident smirk had faded, replaced by a tense expression as he periodically whispered to his executives. "Unlike our competitors," Alicia continued with a pointed look in Chen's direction, "we're not proposing to simply absorb your company into our existing structure. We're offering a genuine partnership, with Dr. Miller retaining leadership of an autonomous research division backed by a dedicated 10-year funding commitment." Dr. Miller nodded approvingly while several board members exchanged impressed glances. The mood in the room had shifted palpably since Alicia's arrival, her presence and performance dispelling any concerns about stability or leadership that Chen had tried to raise. "And now, to address the financial components," Alicia said, transitioning smoothly to the next section of her presentation. As she detailed the terms of her offer, including the innovative equity structure that would benefit not just shareholders but also key research personnel, she could see the board members' interest deepening. Walter Chen shifted uncomfortably in his seat, recognizing that the momentum had turned decisively against him. When Alicia concluded her formal presentation and opened the floor for questions, he leaned forward, determined to regain control of the narrative. "A very impressive presentation, Ms. Winters," he said, his voice carrying a thin veneer of professional courtesy over obvious frustration. "Particularly given your eventful day. But I feel compelled to raise a concern that the board should consider carefully." Alicia met his gaze steadily, already anticipating his angle of attack. "Please do, Mr. Chen." "The incident today wasn't just a random occurrence," Chen said, his tone suggesting grave concern while his eyes betrayed satisfaction at introducing the topic. "It highlights a pattern of controversy that seems to follow your company. One has to wonder whether such drama might become a distraction from the important work the Miller Group is doing." Several board members shifted uncomfortably, recognizing the tasteless strategy of using her near-death experience against her. Before Alicia could respond, Dr. Miller intervened, his usually gentle voice carrying unexpected steel. "Walter, are you seriously suggesting that Ms. Winters is somehow responsible for being targeted by a disturbed individual? That's not only illogical but frankly offensive." Chen backpedaled slightly, raising his hands in a placating gesture. "Not at all, Richard. I'm merely pointing out that high-profile leaders sometimes attract high-profile problems. The board needs to consider all aspects of this partnership, including potential disruptions to operations." Alicia allowed the briefest of smiles to cross her face before responding. "Mr. Chen raises an interesting point, though perhaps not the one he intended." She turned to address the board directly. "Leadership isn't measured by whether challenges arise. They inevitably do. It's measured by how those challenges are met." She straightened her shoulders, her presence somehow expanding to fill the room. "Today, when faced with extraordinary circumstances, my team and I adapted, persevered, and still delivered on our commitments. That's the kind of resilience and determination Winters Innovations would bring to this partnership every day, not just in moments of crisis." A murmur of approval rippled through the board members. Chen's attempt to weaponize the day's events had backfired spectacularly, serving instead to highlight exactly the qualities that made Alicia's leadership exceptional: Before Chen could formulate another line of attack, Marcus discreetly approached Alicia, whispering something in her ear. She nodded almost imperceptibly before addressing the room. "I've just received an update that may be relevant to our discussion," she announced. "James Davidson, the pilot responsible for today's incident, is now in police custody. The FBI has confirmed they're investigating this as a hate crime based on evidence of racial animus in Davidson's communications and social media history." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Chen's face paled slightly, recognizing that his attempt to frame the incident as a distraction now appeared even more insensitive in light of its apparent motivation. "I share this not to dwell on unpleasant matters," Alicia continued smoothly, "but to emphasize something important. Winter's Innovations does not allow discrimination, harassment, or hatred to impede our mission. Not today, not ever. When we encounter such obstacles, we overcome them and move forward stronger than before." She looked directly at Chen as she delivered her final point. "That's a core value that the Miller Group and Winter's Innovations share, a commitment to advancing human potential regardless of superficial differences. It's one of many reasons I believe our partnership would be so powerful." Dr. Miller nodded emphatically. "Well said, Ms. Winters, very well said indeed." The questions that followed were substantive and technically focused, allowing Alicia to showcase her deep understanding of the Miller Group's research and how it would integrate with Winter's Innovations' existing technologies. With each response, she further cemented the impression of a leader who had done her homework thoroughly and possessed both the vision and the technical acumen to execute it. When the final question had been answered, Dr. Miller rose from his seat. "I believe the board has all the information needed to make an informed decision. Ms. Winters, Mr. Chen, if you and your teams would please step outside, we'll begin our deliberations." Alicia gathered her materials with calm efficiency, exchanging a brief nod with Jack as they prepared to leave the boardroom. Walter Chen was already moving toward the door, his expression thunderous as he conferred with his executives in hushed, urgent tones. In the reception area outside, Alicia settled onto one of the sleek leather sofas, maintaining a composed demeanor despite the fatigue that was beginning to press heavily upon her. The adrenaline that had carried her through the presentation was fading, leaving her acutely aware of the various aches and pains from the crash. Marcus handed her a bottle of water and discreetly offered pain medication, which she accepted gratefully. Across the room, Chen and his team huddled in intense discussion, occasionally casting glances in her direction. "How long do you think they'll deliberate?" Marcus asked quietly. "Hard to say," Alicia replied. "The decision is significant enough to warrant thorough discussion, but Dr. Miller seemed eager to reach a conclusion today." Jack joined them, his expression cautiously optimistic. "You were brilliant in there," he said. "Chen's attempt to use the incident against you was particularly desperate. And particularly miscalculated," Alicia noted. "He underestimated how it would appear to the board." Their conversation was interrupted by Walter Chen himself, who approached with a forced smile. "An impressive recovery, Alicia," he said, dropping the formality of surnames in a calculated display of collegial respect. "Most people would still be in the hospital after such an ordeal." "Most people haven't spent 20 years overcoming unnecessary obstacles, Walter," she replied evenly. "It builds a certain resilience." His smile tightened. "Indeed. Well, regardless of the board's decision, I want you to know I consider your presence here today remarkable." The compliment was delivered with enough sincerity to be socially acceptable, but his eyes revealed his true sentiment, frustration that his strategy had failed. "Thank you," Alicia said simply, neither accepting nor rejecting his insincere praise. "The board will make the decision that best serves the Miller Group's future. That's what matters." Chen nodded, recognizing that he would get no further engagement from her. With a terse smile, he returned to his team, who immediately resumed their hushed conference. "He's worried," Jack observed quietly. "Your presentation directly addressed several concerns the board raised after his pitch." Alicia's phone vibrated with an incoming message. It was from Captain Chen. "Davidson in custody. Surrendered after negotiators convinced him the building was surrounded. He's asking to speak with you. FBI advises against it. Thought you should know." She showed the message to Marcus, who shook his head in disbelief. "The audacity of that man is unbelievable. Why would he think you'd want to speak with him after what he did?" "People like Davidson live in a reality distorted by their prejudices," Alicia replied. "In his mind, he's the victim, not the aggressor." Before they could discuss it further, the boardroom doors opened. Dr. Miller emerged, his expression carefully neutral as he addressed both parties. "The board has reached a preliminary decision," he announced. "However, before we finalize it, we have a few additional questions. Ms. Winters, would you join us first, please?" Alicia rose smoothly, exchanging a quick glance with Marcus and Jack. This was unexpected but not concerning. Additional questions during final deliberations were common in major acquisitions. "Of course," she replied, following Dr. Miller back into the boardroom. The board members looked up as she entered, their expressions giving little away. Dr. Miller gestured for her to take a seat at the head of the table, then resumed his own chair. "Ms. Winters," began Eleanor Zhang, the board's most senior member, "your presentation was comprehensive and compelling. There's just one aspect we'd like to explore more deeply." "Certainly, Ms. Zhang." "Your proposed autonomy structure for our research division is innovative," Zhang continued, "but some board members are concerned about how it would function in practice, particularly during disagreements about research priorities or resource allocation." It was a valid concern, and one Alicia had anticipated. "That's an excellent question. We've designed a governance model specifically to address those scenarios." She outlined the proposed structure, emphasizing the checks and balances that would preserve the Miller Group's scientific independence while ensuring alignment with broader strategic goals. The discussion continued for nearly 20 minutes, with various board members posing increasingly specific questions about operational integration, personnel retention, and long-term funding commitments. Alicia addressed each with precision and confidence, drawing on her deep preparation and genuine belief in the merits of the partnership. When the questions finally concluded, Dr. Miller thanked her. "This has been most illuminating. We'll now speak with Mr. Chen before reaching our final decision." As Alicia left the boardroom, Walter Chen was already waiting, his expression tense but determined. They passed without acknowledgement, like boxers between rounds, each focused on their own strategy for the final phase of the contest. Back in the reception area, Marcus and Jack looked at her expectantly. "Detailed questions about the autonomy structure and integration process," she reported. "Nothing unexpected, just drilling down on specifics." "That's a good sign," Jack said. "They wouldn't be this concerned with implementation details if they weren't seriously considering your offer." The minutes stretched into an hour as they waited for Chen's session to conclude. Alicia used the time to return several urgent calls, including one to her company's lead counsel, regarding potential legal action against Premier Charter Services, Davidson's employer. Finally, after what seemed an interminable wait, both Chen and his team emerged from the boardroom. His expression was carefully composed, but the rigid set of his shoulders and the clipped instructions he gave his executives suggested the meeting hadn't gone as he'd hoped. Dr. Miller appeared in the doorway. "Ms. Winters, Mr. Chen, the board is ready to announce its decision. Please join us." As they re-entered the boardroom, Alicia maintained her professional composure, though her heart rate accelerated slightly. She had done everything possible to secure this acquisition, presented a superior offer, demonstrated exceptional leadership under extreme circumstances. addressed every concern with clarity and conviction. The outcome now rested with the 12 individuals seated around the table. Dr. Miller took his place and looked solemnly at both Alicia and Walter Chen. After thorough deliberation, the board has reached a unanimous decision regarding the future of the Miller Group. The room was utterly silent, the tension almost palpable as everyone waited for his next words. Dr. Miller's expression remained neutral for a moment longer, then broke into a warm smile as he turned toward Alicia. Ms. Winters, the board has voted to accept your acquisition offer, subject to the terms and conditions discussed today. We believe that Winters Innovations represents the ideal partner to carry the Miller Group's mission forward into the future. The relief and satisfaction that flowed through Alicia was profound, though her exterior revealed only a gracious smile and a slight relaxation of her shoulders. Walter Chen's face froze in a mask of professional disappointment, his eyes betraying the true depth of his frustration. "Thank you, Dr. Miller, members of the board," Alicia said, her voice steady and warm. "Your trust is not misplaced. Together we will accomplish extraordinary things." As handshakes and congratulations were exchanged around the table, Alicia caught sight of Marcus in the doorway, giving her a subtle thumbs up. Against all odds, a racist pilot, a helicopter crash, a competitor's manipulation, she had prevailed. The acquisition that would transform Winters Innovations was now a reality. Walter Chen approached, extending his hand with rehearsed sportsmanship. "Congratulations, Alicia. You've won fairly and impressively." She accepted his handshake with professional courtesy. "Thank you, Walter. Your offer was formidable." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "Next time, perhaps the circumstances will be more conventional." "Perhaps," Alicia replied, "though in my experience, success rarely follows conventional paths." As Chen and his team departed, Dr. Miller approached, genuine warmth in his expression. "That was quite a performance today, Alicia. I don't just mean the presentation, I mean your entire response to extraordinary adversity. It spoke volumes about your character." "Thank you, Richard. That means a great deal coming from you." He lowered his voice slightly. "Between us, your handling of the situation today was the tipping point for several board members. Walter's attempt to use it against you backfired spectacularly." Alicia smiled. "Sometimes the greatest obstacles become the clearest demonstrations of what we're capable of." Dr. Miller nodded thoughtfully. "Indeed. And speaking of obstacles, I understand the man responsible is now in custody." "Yes," Alicia confirmed, "though I suspect the legal proceedings will be complicated." "Well," Dr. Miller said, patting her shoulder gently, "that's tomorrow's challenge. Tonight I think you've earned some rest, and perhaps a celebration." As they walked out of the boardroom together, Alicia felt a profound sense of completion. The acquisition was secured, Davidson was in custody, and Winters Innovations was poised for its next phase of growth. Yet even as one chapter concluded, she knew another was just beginning, one that would include not only integrating the Miller Group, but also addressing the broader issues highlighted by Davidson's actions. For now, though, she would allow herself a moment to savor this victory. Hard won against obstacles both professional and personal, tomorrow would bring new challenges, but tonight she had proven once again that determination, excellence, and integrity would ultimately prevail against prejudice and hatred. As she stepped into the elevator with Marcus and Jack, her phone buzzed with a breaking news alert. Pilot James Davidson charged with attempted murder, hate crimes, and helicopter incident. Faces life in prison if convicted. Justice, it seemed, was already beginning to take its course. Dawn broke over San Francisco, painting the sky in hues of gold and rose that reflected off the glass facades of the financial district. Alicia stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of her hotel suite, coffee in hand, watching the city come alive beneath her. The events of the previous day felt simultaneously distant and immediate, like a storm that had passed but whose effects were still reverberating through her life. She had allowed herself the luxury of sleeping until 7, a rare indulgence that her body had desperately needed after the trauma of the helicopter crash. Even with the extra rest, every muscle ached, and dark bruises had bloomed across her shoulder and rib cage, souvenirs of the impact with the bay. But the physical discomfort was manageable, almost inconsequential, compared to the satisfaction of having secured the Miller Group acquisition, despite Davidson's attempts to derail it. Her phone, which had been deliberately silenced overnight, buzzed persistently on the nearby desk. When she finally reached for it, she found over 300 notifications, emails, texts, missed calls, and news alerts, all demanding her attention. A knock at the door announced Marcus's arrival. He entered with his tablet already activated, his expression suggesting he'd been awake for hours. "Good morning," he greeted her. "How are you feeling?" "Like I survived a helicopter crash," Alicia replied with a wry smile, but ready to move forward. "What's the situation?" Marcus's fingers danced across his tablet. "The acquisition is the top business story across all major outlets. The press is calling it a landmark deal and a strategic masterstroke. The fact that you closed it hours after being forced into the bay has created a narrative that PR couldn't have scripted better if they tried." He turned the tablet to show her the headline from the Wall Street Journal. "Winter's Triumphs Tech CEO secures 4.2 billion acquisition hours after surviving hate-motivated attack." "And Davidson?" Alicia asked, setting down her coffee cup. "That's the other major story," Marcus replied, his expression darkening. "He was formally charged last night. Attempted murder, commission of a hate crime, reckless endangerment, violation of federal aviation regulations. The list goes on. The FBI has taken over as the lead investigating agency, and they're being very public about the hate crime aspect." Alicia nodded, absorbing this information. "And Premier Charter Services?" "In full damage control mode," Marcus said, a note of satisfaction in his voice. "They've issued a statement claiming they had no knowledge of Davidson's personal views and are shocked and appalled by his actions. But they're already facing serious questions about their hiring and supervision practices. Multiple former employees have come forward overnight with stories about Davidson's behavior that the company allegedly ignored." "As expected," Alicia murmured. Corporations always circled the wagons when their negligence was exposed, but the truth had a way of surfacing nonetheless. "There's something else," Marcus added, his tone shifting. "Davidson is requesting to speak with you again. His attorney contacted our legal department this morning." Alicia raised an eyebrow. "Did they indicate why?" "Apparently he wants to explain himself directly to you. Our counsel's advice is to refuse, obviously. There's no upside to such a meeting, and it could potentially complicate the criminal proceedings." Alicia walked back to the window, considering this unexpected development. There was no logical reason to meet with Davidson, the man who had tried to kill her, who had made his bigoted views abundantly clear. And yet, she felt a certain curiosity about what he might say, what justification he could possibly offer for his actions. "Let's table that decision for now," she said finally. "What's on the immediate agenda?" Marcus returned to his tablet. "Dr. Miller has arranged a breakfast meeting with the Miller Group's executive team at 9. The legal departments are already working on the final acquisition paperwork, and you have a scheduled call with our board at 11 to brief them on the deal. Oh, and Captain Chen is waiting downstairs. She wanted to discuss your job offer before giving her statement to the federal investigators." Alicia nodded, mentally prioritizing these tasks. "Ask Captain Chen to join us for breakfast. I want the Miller Group team to meet her and schedule a press conference for this afternoon. We need to address both the acquisition and the incident directly." As Marcus made the arrangements, Alicia prepared for the day ahead. She selected a crimson suit from her wardrobe, a deliberate choice, both powerful and visible. Today was not a day to blend in or appear subdued. Today was about strength, about moving forward without minimizing what had happened. By the time she emerged from her bedroom, fully dressed and composed, Marcus had arranged everything. "Captain Chen is on her way up," he reported, "and the press conference is scheduled for 2 p.m. at our San Francisco office. The PR team is preparing talking points for your approval." "Good," Alicia said, checking her appearance one last time in the mirror. The bruise on her temple was visible despite her careful makeup application, but she decided against trying to conceal it further. It was part of the reality of what had happened, and she wasn't ashamed of it. A few minutes later, Captain Chen arrived, now dressed in a professional pantsuit rather than hospital scrubs, though her demeanor remained as composed and competent as it had been during the crisis. "Ms. Winters," she greeted Alicia with a firm handshake. "Congratulations on your acquisition. The news is everywhere this morning." "Thank you, Sarah. And please, it's Alicia," she replied warmly. "I was hoping you'd join us for breakfast with the Miller Group's executive team. I'd like them to meet the pilot who'll be heading our new corporate flight department." Chen looked momentarily surprised, then pleased. "So the job offer was serious, even with everything that was happening?" "Especially because of everything that was happening," Alicia confirmed. "Yesterday showed me exactly who you are under the most extreme pressure. That's not something a traditional interview process could ever reveal." Chen smiled, the professional mask softening slightly. "In that case, I'd be honored to join you for breakfast. And yes, I'm very interested in the position." As they prepared to leave for the meeting, Alicia's phone rang with a call from Jack, her attorney. "Davidson's lawyer is being very insistent about this meeting," he reported. "They're suggesting it could be mutually beneficial. Reading between the lines, I think they're fishing for a potential civil settlement, hoping to use any direct communication with you as leverage in the criminal case." "Typical," Alicia replied, unsurprised. "Let's be absolutely clear. There will be no private meeting, no settlement discussions, and no contact whatsoever with Davidson. He'll face the full legal consequences of his actions, both criminal and civil." "Understood," Jack said, relief evident in his voice. "That's what I told them, but they insisted I check directly with you." After ending the call, Alicia, Marcus, and Chen took the elevator down to the hotel's private dining room, where the breakfast meeting was scheduled. As they walked through the lobby, heads turned and conversations hushed. Alicia's face had been splashed across every news outlet since the previous day, and her distinctive appearance made her instantly recognizable. Dr. Miller and his executive team were already seated when they arrived, rising to greet them with a warmth that suggested genuine enthusiasm about the new partnership. After introductions were made and Captain Chen's role explained, the group settled into a productive discussion about the immediate steps for integrating the two companies. "The research team is particularly excited about the autonomous division structure you've proposed," Dr. Miller told Alicia as they reviewed the transition timeline. "It addresses their primary concern about being swallowed by a larger corporate entity." "That was precisely the intention," Alicia replied. "Innovation flourishes with the right balance of freedom and support. Your scientists will have both." As the meeting progressed, Alicia observed the dynamic among the Miller Group executives with quiet satisfaction. There was an openness to their engagement, a willingness to embrace the partnership that hadn't been fully present during the acquisition negotiations. Davidson's attack, rather than undermining her position as he had intended, had somehow accelerated the bonding process between the two organizations. Midway through the meeting, Marcus discreetly showed her a breaking news alert on his tablet. Premier Charter Services faces federal investigation, class action lawsuit following Davidson incident. Alicia nodded slightly in acknowledgement, but kept her focus on the discussion at hand. The consequences for Davidson and his employer would unfold in due course, but her priority now was looking forward, not back. After the breakfast concluded with handshakes and genuine expressions of anticipation for their shared future, Alicia, Marcus, and Chen returned to the hotel suite to prepare for the board call and subsequent press conference. "The media requests are overwhelming," Marcus reported, scrolling through his tablet. "Every major network and publication wants an exclusive. How do you want to handle them?" "One press conference open to all accredited media," Alicia decided. "No exclusives, no individual interviews yet. Let's control the narrative with a single, comprehensive statement." As Marcus stepped away to coordinate with the PR team, Captain Chen approached Alicia with a more serious expression. "There's something I should mention before I accept your job offer," she said. "The federal investigators asked me to testify about Premier Charter's safety culture and management practices. They're building a case not just against Davidson, but potentially against the company's leadership for creating an environment where his behavior was tolerated." Alicia considered this for a moment. "Will your testimony complicate your transition to Winter's Innovations?" "It might create some scheduling challenges during the trial, but no inherent conflicts," Chen replied. "I just wanted to be transparent about it before we proceed." "I appreciate that," Alicia said. "And for the record, I fully support your testimony. Premier Charter needs to be held accountable for their role in enabling Davidson." Chen nodded, visibly relieved. "Thank you. In that case, I officially accept your offer." The remainder of the morning was consumed with preparations, finalizing talking points for the press conference, briefing Winter's Innovations Board on the acquisition details, and coordinating with the legal team on the formal announcement. Throughout it all, Alicia maintained her characteristic focus and composure, though the physical aftermath of the crash was becoming increasingly apparent in the stiffness of her movements and the occasional grimace of discomfort. By early afternoon, they were ready. The press conference was set up at Winter's Innovations' San Francisco office, with a podium bearing the company logo positioned before a backdrop displaying both Winters and Miller Group emblems side by side. The symbolism was deliberate, a visual representation of partnership rather than absorption. The room was packed with journalists, photographers, and camera operators, all eager to capture the first public appearance of the CEO who had survived both an apparent hate crime and secured a multi-billion-dollar acquisition in the same day. The energy was palpable, a mixture of professional interest and genuine curiosity about this remarkable turn of events. As Alicia prepared to enter, Marcus handed her a note that had just been delivered. "It's from the FBI agent leading the Davidson investigation," he explained, "arrived a few minutes ago." Alicia unfolded the paper, reading the brief message with a slight frown. "Ms. Winters, Davidson has made a full confession, including explicit statements about his motivations. You should be aware that his comments are deeply disturbing and will likely become public during trial proceedings. Our office is available to brief you on the details at your convenience. Special Agent Tamara Wilson." Alicia refolded the note and handed it back to Marcus. "Schedule a private briefing with Agent Wilson for tomorrow morning," she instructed. "I want to know exactly what we're dealing with before it becomes public." With that final piece of business addressed, Alicia took a deep breath and stepped toward the door leading to the press conference room. The sound of dozens of journalists rose to a crescendo as she entered, cameras flashing and voices calling out questions before she had even reached the podium. But as she took her position before the sea of media, her expression was one of absolute confidence and clarity. Davidson had tried to silence her, to prevent her from claiming her rightful place in the business world. Now, with the eyes of that world upon her, she would speak more powerfully than ever before. The press conference unfolded with the precision of a meticulously choreographed performance. Alicia addressed the assembled media with eloquence and authority, first announcing the successful acquisition of the Miller Group, then addressing the previous day's incident with measured candor. What happened yesterday was not merely a personal attack, but an assault on the principles of equality and merit that should be the foundation of our society, she stated, her voice clear and unwavering. James Davidson's actions represent a mindset that has no place in aviation, in business, or in any professional environment. The journalists hung on her every word, captivated by the contrast between the gravity of what she had survived and the composed strength with which she now addressed it. I will not allow this incident to overshadow the significant achievement that the Winters Innovations Miller Group partnership represents, she continued. Nor will I be deterred by those who resist progress, whether through regulatory obstruction, market manipulation, or, as we saw yesterday, direct intimidation. Questions from the press ranged from technical inquiries about the acquisition structure to more personal ones about her experience during the crash. Alicia answered each with thoughtful precision, neither downplaying the trauma nor allowing it to define the narrative. Yes, I was targeted because of who I am, she responded to one particularly direct question. But I succeeded because of who I am as well, because of the resilience, preparation, and determination that have guided my career from the beginning. By the time the press conference concluded an hour later, Alicia had effectively reframed the entire incident. What Davidson had intended as an act of degradation had instead become a powerful testament to her leadership. The headlines would focus not on her victimization, but on her triumph over extraordinary adversity. As the media began to disperse, Dr. Miller approached the podium. "That was masterful," he said quietly. "You've turned yesterday's nightmare into today's inspiration." "It's a skill you develop when obstacles are the norm rather than the exception," Alicia replied with a small smile. "Now let's focus on the integration timeline. I want to announce our first joint research initiative within 30 days. The remainder of the day was consumed with meetings, calls, and strategic planning sessions. The stock market had responded enthusiastically to the acquisition announcement, with Winters Innovations shares climbing nearly 7% by closing bell. Financial analysts were already issuing bullish forecasts about the combined company's prospects, particularly highlighting the synergies between their complementary technologies. It was after 9 in the evening when Alicia finally returned to her hotel suite, the physical and emotional toll of the past 36 hours catching up with her at last. Marcus had insisted she take the next morning's FBI briefing via secure video conference rather than in person, a concession to her need for rest that she had reluctantly accepted. Alone in the quiet luxury of her suite, Alicia allowed herself a moment of genuine reflection, away from the performative confidence required in public. The bruises on her body ached, a tangible reminder of how close she had come to a very different outcome. Davidson had not just wanted to stop her from reaching the meeting. He had been willing to risk her life to prove his distorted point about who deserved power and position in the world. Her phone chimed with a message from her sister Claire, who had been frantically trying to reach her since news of the crash broke. "Just saw your press conference. Mom would be so proud. Call me when you can. Love you." The mention of their mother brought a wave of emotion that Alicia rarely permitted herself to feel. Evelyn Winters had been her first and most important role model, a brilliant engineer who had fought her way through the male-dominated tech industry of the 1980s, facing discrimination and dismissal at every turn. She had instilled in her daughters an unshakable belief in their own capabilities and a clear-eyed understanding of the additional barriers they would face. "Never let them see you stumble," Evelyn had told Alicia once after a particularly difficult professional setback. "Not because you're perfect, but because they're waiting for proof that you don't belong. Don't give them that satisfaction." Alicia had carried that advice throughout her career. maintaining a public persona of unwavering competence even in the face of challenges that would have broken many others. Davidson was hardly the first to resent her success or question her legitimacy, though he was certainly the most violent in expressing it. With these thoughts still circling in her mind, Alicia finally surrendered to exhaustion, falling into a deep sleep despite the lingering discomfort of her injuries. The following morning arrived with a fresh wave of media coverage. Davidson's arrest and the details of the charges against him dominated the news cycle, with legal experts weighing in on the likelihood of conviction and the potential precedent-setting nature of the case. Premier Charter Services was facing mounting scrutiny as well, with former employees coming forward with allegations of systemic discrimination and safety violations that had been ignored or actively concealed by management. At precisely 10 a.m., Alicia connected to the secure video conference with FBI Special Agent Tamara Wilson, a composed woman with intelligent eyes and the careful speech patterns of someone accustomed to testifying in court. "Ms. Winters, thank you for making time for this briefing," Wilson began. "As I mentioned in my note, Davidson has made a full confession, and I felt it was important for you to understand the context before details become public through court proceedings." Alicia nodded, her expression calm but attentive. "I appreciate your consideration, Agent Wilson. What has he revealed?" Wilson consulted a file before continuing. "Davidson's hostility toward you specifically, and successful minorities in general, appears to stem from deep-seated resentment over his own professional stagnation. He was passed over for promotion several times in recent years, including for Premier Charter's chief pilot position, which ultimately went to a younger woman of color. Let me guess, he attributed that decision to diversity quotas rather than merit," Alicia said, unsurprised. "Precisely," Wilson confirmed. He became increasingly fixated on the idea that his career had been sabotaged by what he called reverse discrimination. When he was assigned to your charter flight, he already harbored significant animosity, viewing you as a symbol of everything he resented. Alicia absorbed this information with a measured expression. It was a familiar narrative. The assumption that her success must have come at someone else's expense, that her achievements were somehow less legitimate because of who she was. "The most concerning aspect," Wilson continued, "is that the sabotage was premeditated. Davidson admitted to fabricating the fuel pump issue specifically to delay your arrival in San Francisco. He was aware of your acquisition meeting and its importance." "That confirms what we suspected," Alicia noted, "but it doesn't explain the escalation to pursuing us in another aircraft and forcing us down into the bay." Wilson's expression darkened. "That was impulsive rather than planned. According to Davidson, when he realized you had circumvented his sabotage by arranging alternative transportation, he became enraged. He perceived it as yet another example of rules not applying to people like you, his words. So he decided to take matters into his own hands," Alicia concluded. "Yes. He contacted a colleague who had already prepared another helicopter for a different charter, claimed there was an emergency, and took the aircraft without proper authorization. His initial intent, according to his statement, was to scare you and teach you a lesson. But his actions escalated as his anger intensified." Alicia's expression remained composed, though her eyes reflected a deeper understanding of just how dangerous Davidson's mindset had been. "Did he express remorse during his confession?" Wilson hesitated, which was answer enough. "Not in the conventional sense. He expressed regret about the consequences for himself, but maintained that you had provoked his actions by not respecting his authority as your charter pilot." "Classic displacement of responsibility," Alicia observed. "Has he been evaluated psychologically?" "That's ongoing," Wilson replied, "but preliminary assessment suggests he's not clinically delusional. just deeply entrenched in a worldview that justified his actions to himself. The briefing continued for another 30 minutes, with Wilson providing additional details about the investigation, the evidence collected, and the expected timeline for prosecution. Throughout, Alicia maintained her professional composure, asking insightful questions that demonstrated her focus on understanding the full context rather than dwelling on personal grievance. As the call concluded, Wilson offered a final observation. "Ms. Winters, in my 15 years with the Bureau, I've interviewed many individuals who committed